Hello.
I just heard the pony galloping.
Oh. First it was the knock and then the pony. Yeah, it's like
I'm
little Easter
catching all
eggs.
these subtle. If you're missing it, you guys, there's a door knock, there's a pony. You gotta listen for all the good stuff.
Do you hear that too? Pat Roach thought that I did that. Pat Roach thought I did that. He's like, I thought that was you going. And I was like, I should be funny if I did.
Pat has a lot of faith in human beings. That's what I love about him.
He does. He does. Hey, before we get jumping into a conversation, let me tell people who I'm talking to today. I am excited. So one of my favorite things about this show is that of my job is that I get to meet new people every day. And every conversation has been a fun time. I can honestly say I don't think I've had a conversation with someone on here that I look back and went, that wasn't worth my time. That was every single time. But some of them, on top of that, are just memorable. And for sure, Alecia Huck, meeting you has been one of the coolest things that have come out of this whole show. So for those of you guys who don't know, Alecia Huck, she is an alumni, obviously, because we're on the show here, but she currently is she's running Maverick Company. She sold for 5 summers with JYD from 1995 to 1999, went to the University of South Dakota. Nobody's perfect. Originally from Spearfish, South Dakota. And her favorite scroll is number 3. I will persist until I succeed. But here's the deal. So she, with Maverick Company, and I'll let you here in a second describe a little bit more exactly what you do, but you are spending your day-to-day working with like C-level executives trying to help them with their companies. And we'll get into the specifics of how and all that in a little bit. But I'm saying that because I have gotten to get to know you through our sister podcast, the Executive Exercises. I've gotten to meet you at the alumni reunion and just kind of like phone calls that we've shared where you've coached me a ton just out of like pouring into me out of the kindness of your heart. And it really means a lot because the value that you've brought to like my mentality has been uh, probably the biggest source of encouragement that I've had doing the show. I remember one time we were sitting down and you talked to me and I'm assuming this is what you're like with your clients, but you were talking to me and um we as Southwestern people we're used to thinking big and we're used to like going for big goals, but there's a hard line of like this is what I actually think I can do and this is what I probably can do, and there's that fear in between, right? But you give me so much courage to get through that with the way that you like speak life into me, into the words that you say. You're like a cheerleader mixed with like Mort Utley mixed with like Dan Rather and Dan Moore, from a standpoint of just like encouraging you to go run through a brick wall. Like if I needed to like run through a brick wall to save my life, I'd be like, I need to call Alecia. She'll help me like destroy this thing. Yeah.
Oh, you're gonna make me cry. You're not supposed to make me cry.
Hey, it's all good. And then and really that's meant the mentality aspect of it has been amazing. The perspective that you have, we had you on with Lee, and even just the eloquence with which you share the points, your ability to make points and draw examples and analogies to be able to establish like a solid point of view and perspective, solid, which I'm sure you guys are going to enjoy. So welcome to the show, welcome back to the show. If you guys want to go catch Alicia's first episode, she was on what was it, 2 years ago now, almost a year and a half ago now.
So. Pack supplies, it's a long one.
Yeah,
but you're gonna need snacks.
and a seatbelt for the ride. This is gonna be a lot of fun. So welcome back to the show. I'm so excited to talk to you again. I love your little your instead of putting your Instagram, you put your motto, which is "Win as you." Let's just kick it off there. This is something that I've heard you start saying recently. What's up with that? What do you mean by that?
Well, by the way, thank you. It's really easy to pour into you. And I always joke that I'm about 50% cheerleader and 50% bulldog. It's great.
That's it. That's it.
So that's the combo. And that is, I think one of the great things about Southwestern is that we all got a chance to coach people, right? So even if you're just an idiot 19-year-old who barely made it through your first summer, we're like, you can lead people. Here's some to like, go find some. And then, sit down with them on Sundays and tell them what you think about what they're doing. But man, that's an amazing gift, right? Because the truth is, if you're doing it right, you really do have things to pour into people, right? You can just show up with whatever you got. Mostly what people need is to be loved on. And sometimes love is like encouragement and nudging. And sometimes love is like, I'm going to kick your butt, go back to work. Right. But I feel like a bunch of people got the idea that they could be good at that at Southwestern. And that's a good thing for life because not everybody gets those chances. So,
Ooh,
um, yeah,
hey
right.
man,
Ooh,
just starting
dive
deep right
right
off the
in.
bat. Let's just
Dive
go.
right in. Man, ever since the reunion, like I got a call from Clint Taylor yesterday, and super cool, awesome guy. And he's like, yeah, I forgot, like we're all around book people, but like people you haven't seen in a while, what it's like, because we knew each other during some of the most important years of our lives in terms of who we became. And so being around those people, seeing those people, right, getting to meet you, we've talked a zillion times. It feels like you're my little brother from a long time. And, you know, my
Yeah,
mocha little brother.
that's
Is it
right.
weird when I say mocha? Is that
No, it's
bad?
great. Thank
Okay,
you
I
for
can say it.
taking think no, I please appropriate that. I put it out there for the people to take, not for me to
Yeah.
I'm giving it to the world,
When
not
you're
keeping it
this
to myself.
blonde, it's all appropriation, is really how it looks. Oh, this got weird fast. Okay, so when is you?
This is why, because you were saying, like, people called me and said they listened to my whole episode last time. It was 2.5 hours. Why? This is why, because it's fun to listen to you. This is why.
Oh man. When I first started doing this, like I was like, why in the world would anybody want to listen to old book stories? And why would they want to listen to mine? And now I'm like, oh, this is a brilliant idea. This is amazing. And you're such a good interviewer.
Thanks.
Um, so when is you? I mean, part of it I would say kind of started for me on the book field because when you're that young, you get all these instructions, right? And you're like trying to do it the right way if you're smart. And I was told, listen, this is a 150-year-old company. Do what we know works. Take the cold shower, do the demos, start at this time, stop at this time. And I still think that's the best way to do it. And then you get into some areas that are a little more nuanced. Like, my boss said, run between houses. So I would run between houses. And then one day he sat me down in the summer and he said, you should not run between houses. And I was like, what? Like, why? He's like, because you're too tense already. You should chill out a little. It's like, okay, great. I don't really know. Can I hustle though? Like, I should hustle, right? He's like, yeah, don't lollygag. It's just a confusing thing. And I think as a culture, we have such a guru mentality. Like, there's all these people who make a living by telling you how to do it the right way. And in sales, I mean, we all were still reading that book, How I Raised Myself from Failure to Success in Selling.
Mm.
It's all of the ideas in it come from like the 1800s and insurance salesmen. Like, really, nothing has progressed since then. And that's all in those books. You're like, just find the person who sells the most stuff and copy every single thing they do. So, one of the things that was hard for me when I sold books is the places where people would tell me to do it a certain way, and I couldn't do it the same way that they did.
Ooh, yeah.
Right. And I
Mhm.
and I was failing, and then I felt bad about myself because but what they were giving me wasn't sustainable. So if you're listening to this and you're still in the book field, just do what they tell you. Like, take the cold showers, do the number of demos, do the hours, because it's too much brain damage to try and figure out your own special unicorn way. But the further you get past the book field, the more important I think it is to figure out what actually makes you happy, what you're really good at, how you really perform at your highest levels. Like, a good example would be, when we sold books, everybody always talked about consistency. Like, you should be really, really consistent, right? And I felt so bad about myself because I wasn't consistent. I would have these big ups and big downs, right? And now what I know is, who gives a damn? It's all the numbers at the end of the year that really make a difference. I'm not a consistent performer, right? Like, I'm not going to be a straight line. So what I should do is manage the lows so they're not as low, right? And then when I'm on a roll, work longer and take advantage of that. Make 5 extra calls, do the extra thing. So
Mm.
I just think that we demoralize people when we set a standard and we say, be like this because this person did it this way and they're successful. Their stuff may not work for you. Your job is to figure out how to translate it to something that does. Because if you're not going to win the game as you, what's the point of winning anyway?
Oof. Amen. Drop. All right. Well, it's a good episode. Thanks everybody for listening.
Winning.
Um, that's there's so much wisdom even in that, and I kind of wanted to get into that a little bit so we can transition into what you're up to now because basically what you're saying, or let me know if I'm understanding this. So there's a standard that's been set for 160 years or whatever, however long the company's been around, and it's do this XYZ. If you type in, it's like a calculator. If you do this, 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 and that, by the end of the summer, you'll have this, this, and that, which is great for your first
Yes.
summer. But then as you develop and you want to change and you want to tweak, the way that you grow is you start applying you to that system,
Mhm.
and or sorry, applying the system to who you are. So in your case, you got told, hey, don't be so intense because you're already intense. And so when you show up at a door and you're running, it's like too much intensity. So in fact, it worked for you to kind of just mellow out a little bit on the approach so
Yep.
that your efficiency was better. So by tailoring a system to who you are, it allowed you to just really, explode or just be better, because some people are better at selling it in the country or in suburbia, or some people are better at selling the whole package versus just individual little things. And we don't
Yes.
really know what that is until you get all the basics down. And
Yes.
then you start trimming the fat of like, this isn't helping you. This is, do that more.
Yes.
And then do this
What
less.
what you said is really important, right? Once you get the basics down,
Hmm.
right? And
Right.
I think there's some things you can't mess with. Like, I don't think schedule is a smart thing to mess with, right? Like, you got to be thoughtful about what you fine tune. Like, my first summer, they told us, don't wear makeup. It takes time to put it on and it'll just run anyway. I always felt better if I was wearing just a little bit of mascara.
Sure.
So, like, my third or fourth summer, I started putting on a little bit of mascara in the morning, and then I would touch it up again before gravy, because that 12 seconds gave me like, and I had a girlfriend and she liked lipstick. So she wore lipstick when she was on the book
Oh,
field, right?
interesting.
Megan Valentine, those of you who know her, she's amazing and, gorgeous. But yeah, I think it's just, it makes you so sad if you're not winning as you, right? And I don't think it's sustainable. You can't be somebody else for long periods of time. You should get to know what your sort of unique combination of stuff is and go for that, because then you get the joy and the fulfillment of winning as you. And like you said,
Ooh,
when you're young, when you're really, really young, you don't know who you are. So you should do the system that's there, because that's part of how you discover who you are.
interesting. Well, so how do you discern? Like, how do you, and I'm not even just talking about like the book field. I'm talking about when you talk
Yeah,
to clients in it, I go, okay, so this is who I am. How do I win as me? Like, how do I
right.
know that, what parts to tweak?
Yeah.
Is it like a stats thing? Is it like a personality thing? Like, what are you looking for when you're advising this?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, if you're a CEO, right? Let's say you started a company or you took over a company. I'll give you a really generalized example. Most people, when they're trying to lead, they're trying to get a result from people, they tend to default into a couple of different categories of leadership, right? So, real broad distinctions. One I would describe as command. Command style leaders are really task oriented, they're aggressive, they come in, they start the meeting with, here's what we got to get done today. And when they're stressed out, they're always thinking, I don't have time to babysit people's feelings. We have to get these things done, right? It's what we sort of relate to in our culture, like that's what a strong leader is. There's
Mm,
another kind of leader that it would be called a nurture kind of leader. They're more collaborative by nature. They're paying attention to the value or the relationships in the room, right? They're really listening for harmony. They're trying to figure out, how do we get everybody to move? And when they're stressed out, they will say things like, I can't worry about all the stuff we have to take care of the people, because that's how we get the stuff done. They're better team builders. They just generally are good at a bunch of stuff that command style leaders aren't necessarily. As you mature, you should learn how to do both. But what I see a lot is this really sad thing where a command style leader has been yelled at about being nice. Andres, you're too intense. You got to be nice to people, man. They don't care how much you know until they know how much you care, right?
mm,
Except if you're a command style, you're like, I don't understand how I be nice and get the results that I'm supposed to get. Like, I can get you results or I can babysit your feelings. I can't do both things, right? And nurture style leaders are always told they need to toughen up. And they're thinking, I don't want to be like that. I can't be like that. I won't be like that. Screw it. I'll just do it my own way. But we're making both of them wrong, right? So when I meet a
mm.
leader that's really super command, I'm not going to talk them out of being command. I can't turn them into a nurture leader. And why would you want to? They have gifts. There's something that works about the way that they do it. So then the game is, how do we level you up here? So part of what I think is a problem with leadership training in our country is that we're too generic about it all, right? It's all a big philosophy lesson about like lead by example. You're like, great, how do I run this damn meeting? Right? If I'm command,
Yeah.
how do I run it? So I think if you make the advice more specific, like for command leaders, you want to teach them to be fair. It's not fair to yell at somebody if you didn't give them a clear set of instructions. It's not fair to be
Mm.
mean if they have to guess what they're supposed to do, right? And on the nurture side, you want people to work on being clear and direct, because they're never, even when they think, I got an email from a nurture leader that I worked with, and she's like, you'll be so proud. I was so direct in this email. And I said, I read it, was like 5 lines of wandering, whatever. I wrote back to her, I'm like, I don't actually know what you're asking for in the email. Like, I don't know what you're trying to accomplish, but
Wow.
I literally can't tell. And she was worried she'd been too harsh, right? And then, by the way, there's a third category of people who do both, depending on the situation, and they kind of flip back and forth. Healthy leaders can borrow from the other side, but command leaders are still command leaders. So I can't go
Mhm.
in, I'm super command, by the way. So I can't go in and run a meeting and pretend like I'm not anxious when there's a big problem or something's going wrong. I can't just like, it's fine. No, it's going to be more intense than that. And then I'm going to be really good at apologizing, usually with expensive alcohol, is how I tend to do.
Nice. There's an
Yeah.
answer for everything.
So I think it is really, I mean, it really is a sad kind of, it's a lonely moment when you're doing the best you can to get whatever result, lead the people you want to lead, produce whatever you want to produce, and feeling like who you are is the problem.
Mm.
So when I work with leaders, I'm
Yeah.
going to help them figure out what it is you need to shift and change. And some of it is environmental. I met with somebody this week and he's just in the wrong role. He's not going to be successful in that role. It's not a good fit for his personality. And he's been miserable for a long time. And some of it is he has never been at the executive level before. So he doesn't, there are things he doesn't know. Like you get to the executive level usually by being a super doer, like you do a ton of stuff and you're good at it really fast. Being an executive is about what you say no to, not what you get done. It's about setting the priorities. So his is a twofold problem,
Mm.
right? One, he's in a role that doesn't really fit him. And that's an issue that we have to fix. And we have to fix this part where he doesn't he doesn't know how to play that executive role because he's busy just trying to crank out as much stuff as he can crank out. So working with people is figuring out how to tell the truth about what's really not working, right? And sometimes they just haven't had anybody sit them down and go, well, gosh, Andres, it's not working because you're kind of a dick. But I mean,
Yeah.
you know that, right? Like you know you're kind of a dick, right? And you're like,
Yeah.
yeah, I am. Like sometimes I really am. I'm like, it's fine. It's no big deal. We'll sort that out. Like, I'm a dick too. So's my dog. He's cute, but he's
Yeah.
feisty, right? So I think part of
Wow.
what it is telling the truth, right? But not attacking people with it. Like, I don't think you're wrong if you're an asshole at work. I think you probably just are too command and you're stressed out. And some of it's not appropriate, and we have to adjust for that. But I don't think it makes you a bad person if you lose your temper every now and then. I want to help you
Mm.
not do that. But we just have weird expectations for people around leadership. And I feel like you just get so much further if you cast a wider net.
It's okay. So many good things you said there's, which I'm going to dig into. But before we get any further, let me just have you explain to people like what you do, how
Sure.
it specializes, and then I'll dig into some of the stuff you said because there's stuff about leadership in there. There's stuff about being in the right role. There's stuff about being truth and being honest and direct. So much stuff I want to dig into. But let's just go 30,000 foot view. What is Maverick and Company?
Right. So I'm a consultant, right? Heart of hearts, that's what I do. You can call it a coach, you can call it whatever you want. There's a lot of different names for it. But my specialty is working with executive teams in fast growing companies, mostly because that's one of the hardest things you can do. Because when you're in a fast growing company, it's sort of like rebuilding the train while you drive the train down the tracks at 1,000 miles an hour, right? Or while you're
Mm.
flying the plane. So I do some speaking, I do some writing, stuff like that. But most of my time is spent with teams, helping them figure out how to team better so they can be more effective. So, for example, most teams operate with all the efficiency and sophistication of the 10th grade student council down the street. So if you think
Okay.
back to high school and who was on your student council, or if you were, right? There's always one person who talks too much and tries to control everything. There's two people that are just too quiet. There's a charming person it's all the same dynamics. And most of us didn't get better at running meetings when we joined companies or when we started to run companies because nobody ever taught us how.
That's
So
true.
then we're adults and now we're not planning prom. Now we're making $100 million decisions with the same skills we used to plan under the sea for the 500th time.
Is that a Back to the Future reference? Because I
I think
appreciate
that
that.
was actually prom my junior year. I think we did Under the Sea, if I remember correctly. If Leslie Hall is listening and can call me and tell me which one we did, that'd be great. So,
That's hilarious.
but things like, and so how do you even make decisions as a team, right? One of the things a lot of people do is people just say, well, I think. You spend 3 hours saying, I think, no decisions get made. You want to murder everybody. It's awful, right? If you just say things like, I propose we X, right?
Wow.
Something really simple, because then everybody gets out of the politeness trap and starts getting into action. So, a lot
Mm,
of what I do with teams is really, some of it is really the basics, but any sport that you ever want to be great at, you got to start with the basics. So, people have to learn how to manage other people, right? How do we do accountability? How do we do celebration? They got to figure out how to make decisions as a team, how to delegate, move resources around, right? Problem solve. And they need to figure out, and this is sort of the nerdiest part of what I do, how to build infrastructure. So
mm.
as you get bigger, what people mean when they say scale is they mean building systems and processes and tools so you can do more work and make more money, right? As you get bigger, not just hire more people.
Amen to that. Amen to that. Okay, couple even questions about this. How do you define fast-growing companies?
Um, there's an element of underlying panic in the room. So most of the companies I work with are going to be above 5 million and probably under 250. And I know that sounds like a lot, like a really broad range, but the truth is, depending on the industry, right? $100 million in construction is just no money at all, and 100 million in professional services is a lot of money. So for them, it's probably means they've doubled or grown by more than 30 or 40%. It kind of depends on the niche that they're in, who they serve, and how long they've been around. But the way it feels, like the experience they have is you get bigger and you're like excited about that, and then all of a sudden one day it sort of starts to be beyond you, like it kind of starts falling apart on you. It's out of control and you can feel it, right? So no matter how hard you work, you can never get caught up. Like no matter how late you stay,
Mm,
no matter how many people you hire, no matter what, you just can't ever seem to get on top of it. And your good people start missing stuff they shouldn't. So like I know Andres for years, he's always done this role. He's been really good at it, but for some reason, customers aren't getting calls back or quality issues are popping up, right? And you're like, I don't understand why that's happening. You see things like you hire new people and it almost starts to make it worse. So even though everybody's a good person and they're doing everything they can, and you've got more people and better tools and all this, your profit margins start to shrink. Customers come, like there are just more breakdowns, more ugly surprises, and you
mm.
just can't figure out what's actually going wrong. That's a sign that you've outgrown your infrastructure, right? It's like you got a table and you built it to withstand 500 pounds, but you heap another 1,500 pounds on there and the table breaks because it's just not strong enough to support that. So
Mm.
it means you didn't build what you needed.
So what okay, you got a client that comes to you and
Yes.
it's a potential client. What are in the book field, it was something like this person, if this person's struggling with math, perfect, right?
Mhm.
Or this person's really, really good at school, but they're just super involved. Also perfect for what we sold.
Mhm.
For
Yep.
you, what are some of those like green flags that you look for? Or I guess in their case, they're red flags that you're like, hey, I can help with this. this is the
Yeah.
right fit for me that I can
Yeah.
help you with.
The biggest thing I look for is that the leader isn't a jerk. Like, you got to be one of the good
Oh,
guys, because if you're not, I just, one, I'm not interested in helping you win, because I like to work for good people. Like, sidebar, I had a client, they would throw a big Christmas party every year. They had about 34 people in their team. And every year, the week before the party, they would give out $100 cash in an envelope to each person that was going to the party. And they would say, find someone you think needs this and bring the story to the party. So you take your little
that's
hundred
cool.
bucks and you would go find someone that needed it, that you thought needed it, and give it to them. And then, so it's that kind of humans, right? It's an
Hmm.
RF Bowie up in South Dakota who, every little league team in almost every town, he has a store and they do grocery and retail. They sponsor all the little league teams, right? Like, they, when my grandmother died, they sent flowers to her funeral. Like, just really good human beings who want to win, and they are very competitive, but they want to win in the right way and for the right reasons. So those are the kind of people. I have an executive that I work with now who's a former book guy, and he was like, Alicia, I make enough money, but what I really want is to make the company really, really strong so we can do even more cool stuff for people. And one of the people on his team, their spouse passed away, and so this person was left with like two or three kids to raise full time, and like life has been really chaotic, and one of the kids has something chronic, so he just paid him a year's worth of salary to not work.
That's wild.
It's
That's
amazing.
so cool. You get to work with people like that.
Yeah, so incredible people, but then more practically what I'm looking for is, um, I like to do big ROI. So I want to get you a big fat return on the big fat check that you write for me.
Right.
So I'm looking for, how's your infrastructure, right? Do you have a team that is, they're going to have good cash flow, but they're going to have problems in other areas, right? We know how to make money, but we can't seem to solve for quality, or we just have too many of this, too little of this. They've got problems with their team. They have a young management team, right? They're not holding people accountable the way that they should. The truth is, and this is something, if you're running a business, that I would tell you that almost no one ever tells you, everybody's making it up. Everybody
Yeah.
sucks at most of what they're doing. And it's almost a miracle that anything ever goes right enough, long enough for people to stay in business. So while you're yelling at yourself about all these mistakes that you make, just know that everybody's making a similar set of mistakes, and it's not that big a deal. But if you want to keep elevating your business or making more money or doing more good or whatever, then you're going to have to deal with you. But you're not losing because you don't do everything right. You're actually very normal.
Well, that's an interesting from your perspective, that's very refreshing. Because sometimes it feels like, even from a personal experience, but I know from talking to a lot of people who also run their own business from the show, it's like there you could tell that there's some of that where it's like, I didn't really know what I was doing. Then all of a sudden it worked, and then we just kept doing what worked. And that was it's fun, fascinating. For you, how did you learn about this? Like, because the book field didn't teach you all this stuff, right? What was the continuing education that you did to like, be a student of the game and then get this good at what you do?
Yeah. Well, I would say, I mean, I sold for 5 summers, and I would say selling for 5 summers, having a student on my first summer, we were number one team. And so my student manager was incredibly adept. It was like, it took him like 4 years to produce a number one team, and then he really nailed it. And I got to watch a lot of things organizationally that made a huge difference. And then when I came back as a manager, I got to learn the insider secrets. So that made a huge difference. So working with Jeff Hahn and watching him and learning from him was really big. And then after I graduated, I did a couple of different things. A lot of people here listening have done landmark education. Some people think it's stupid and weird. Whatever, it's fine. It's leadership training is some of the best that I've ever seen anywhere. Like, anywhere. Um, Thinking about, like, they have a course called the ILP, the Introduction Leaders Program. One of the promises of the course is you'll learn to stand powerfully in the face of no resistance or no agreement. Sorry. So when a whole room full of people think you're stupid and wrong, can you stand in front of them and get something done anyway? Like, it's an
Mm.
intense thing, right? Like, most of us want agreement in the room, and Southwestern gives you all these amazing audiences that are super for you. So I did a lot of intense training like that. And then honestly, I had kind of a dicey childhood, which I didn't really realize until I was an adult. And so I went back and did a lot of therapy, and I've done all kinds of programs to help me sort those pieces out. And I think that's given me a deeper understanding of human beings and group dynamics and all of those things. And I've read, I'm a huge nerd. There's 8,000 books behind me and in this room because it's such a great way to learn from someone else, right? If you can get one really good thing, and I'm lucky I have really good retention, so I can find different things from different places. And then the last thing I would say is I have a shit ton of experience. That's
Yeah,
not the right
that's
way to put
true.
that.
That's true.
But
Hey, that's
Malcolm
what I like.
Gladwell did this book and he's like 10,000 hours, and I added it up once and I was like, check. I mean, I've had a chance because I've been a consultant for a long time. I've had a chance to work with a whole bunch of different types and sizes of teams in a whole bunch of different types of industries. So I've seen a whole wide range of problems and a whole wide range of solutions. And that gives you, just like when you sold books, right? By the time you've met with, you know, 3,000 families, you're like, I know something. By the time you've met with 30,000 families, you're like, now I really know something.
Yeah, that makes sense. Do you have a specific kind of industry that you love working with the most, or that like gets you most excited, or is it all about the same?
It's all kind of the same. They're all, and I'm going to say this in a weird way, they're all kind of stupid in the same ways. We all make the same sets of mistakes, right? Like, so it's not, my rule is, and this is a trick that I use. If you go into a new industry, you need to learn 13 words. 13 words that are specific to that industry is enough to give you a sense of how it works and to not sound like a moron in meetings. So it doesn't leave people thinking you're an expert, but they don't think they should toss you out because you have no idea. So I was just in like
13 words.
13 words, right? If it's manufacturing, you need to know what deburring is. You just do. So, yeah, I've worked with a couple years ago. I worked with the Council for State Supreme Court Chief Justices, which was sort of
Bananas.
mind blowing. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Wow.
oil and gas, construction, retail, education, nonprofits. It's every now and then I'm like, I don't know why I'm in this room. Like,
But
somebody's
hey,
gonna come pull me out. And then I'm like, oh, I have to, like, here's the result I have to produce. And then it's fine. But you're like, well, this seems kind of weird. Grew up in a
that's wild.
trailer in South Dakota and I'm here now.
The Supreme Court I mean, from a trailer in South Dakota to the Supreme Court,
State Supreme Courts.
State Supreme Court. I mean, even that's
Yeah.
still bananas, man.
Oh, yeah, it's insane.
That's so wild. Now, okay, now that we kind of established what you do in
Yeah.
that, let me go back to some of the things you said earlier because I wanted to ask you about this. So one of the things that you mentioned was there was a guy who thought he was in the wrong role, and I feel like that happens so
Mhm.
often.
Yeah.
General advice, because I know everybody's in a different boat, so it kind of goes against the generality of leadership training. But
Yeah.
what are some signs that you're in the wrong role, and how could I fix that if that's
Yeah.
me?
Ooh, that's a great question. Um, when you think about results, so when we set goals in Southwestern, it was always, here's my goal.
Yeah.
That's the goal, right?
Mhm.
In real life, as an adult, you want to look at two things: the end result and your experience producing it. So, not just did I sell 5,000 units, how did I feel selling 5,000 units? Was I
Mm,
miserable? Did I hate it? Did I love it? Half and half,
mm.
right? So, one of the keys that I would look for is, are you miserable? Like, are you sad? Do you not want to go into work in the morning? Like that, you know what I mean? It doesn't mean that necessarily the role is wrong, but sometimes it's not that complicated. Like, if you hate what you're doing, it might be the environment around you. It might be something internal, right? Could be the role itself. I think one of the best things you can look at, there's a book called The Big Leap by Gay Hendricks, and he distinguishes between your zone of competency, so things that you're good at, right? Like you're competent, like you're probably a competent driver. And then there's your zone of greatness. These are things that you're really, really good at, but they still wear you out.
Mm.
So you can do them, you can do a lot of them, you can produce good results, but your experience is not there. What you're looking for, ideally, and may we all be this blessed, is to live a life where your work occurs in your zone of genius. Your zone of genius is the stuff that is unique to you. That is, for you, you probably take a lot of it for granted, especially when you're young, because it comes so naturally to you that it's hard to even believe that other people don't have that ability. Like
Mm.
I would argue, Andres, one of you, you're in the zone, like you have a zone of genius. Maybe it's greatness. I think it's actually genius with asking questions. Like you are such a great interviewer. I think your skill in that regard and the way that you listen to people is, I think that's the secret sauce of the podcast. I think that's why it works so well. And it
Thanks.
was the thank you. It was like the foundation of our friendship, right? Like you listen fully, and almost no one does that. And you ask really insightful questions that allow other people to showcase how they're awesome. And you cheer for them with them. You're like, yeah, yay, that's amazing, right? Like you were laughing about, I'm a good cheerleader. Like you're psyched for people. You're like, that's the greatest story, right? It doesn't matter that you probably at this point know more Bookfield stories than almost anybody except maybe Dan Moore. And like but you're always thrilled for people, right? So part of what I would look for in your role is, are you energized,
Mm.
right? Is there something about it that kind of pulls you down? Do you have a sense that you're capable of it? Like you can do it and you like the result that you're about to produce. And by the way,
Mm.
it's okay if you're not in your zone of genius and your perfect role right away. I think just you should keep getting better at distinguishing what is a great role for me and what's not. I mean, I got
Mm.
approached recently, which happens from time to time, from a company, and they're like, we want you to take this job for our company. And I'm like, well, that's kind of awkward because I run a business over here, right? But
Yeah.
they're like, no, you have all these skills. You know how to build leaders 2 layers deep. You know how to do these different things. We want you. And so I'm right in the middle of that right now, right? I always am willing to look at other things, but what would that really look like? And is that a good fit for me? 'Cause it's
Mm.
clearly a great opportunity, but it might not be one for me.
Right. That's super interesting. Well, and I love that you said, by the way, thank you. That was really nice. If you just, I appreciate that.
All true, baby.
I appreciate that. Um, I try, but okay. So this is a really fantastic like topic. I think because some of it there's a fine line, right? Something is like, hey, maybe you're not having a good experience because you need to grow,
Hmm.
and then as you grow, like I wasn't good at asking questions at the beginning of this. You know, I had some idea because of my communication skills with Southwestern,
Yeah.
but I mean, you talked about the 10,000 hours. I mean, I spent hours. I don't know about 10,000 yet, but I've spent hours asking people questions. So by nature, you're
Mhm.
gonna just kind of start figuring out what you need to do to be good at that. But what if at first I hated it? Like, I guess what I'm trying to ask is there also like a time that you got to give that role a chance before yeah, as you can get better at it, or is there like you know what I'm asking? Because like maybe it's
Yeah.
like my results are there and my experience sucks, but it's just because I'm new and I'm uncomfortable. But maybe a year later,
Yeah.
actually, I'm kind of good at this, and the
Yeah.
experience is a pleasure. Kind of like, does that make sense?
I think it's a great question, and I talked with somebody who was selling insurance, who was getting ready to quit, and they were like, "I hate it so much." And part of what I think it was easy to say, "Yeah, I don't know if that job's a good fit for you," is because they had gotten to competency, right?
uh,
So I think that might be the good litmus test because the truth is, when you're 23, you barely, and I don't want this to sound insulting, it's just this is the truth of the world. When you're 23, you barely know who you are. You might know who you want to be in that moment. Like you have a
yeah,
sense of who you think you're supposed to be and who you want to be, and you kind of have but like developmentally, you're just still so influenced and there's still so much to discover, right? It's like saying, well, I only like cheese sandwiches. Well, that's because you've never tasted turkey. No one's
right,
ever taken you to a pizza place,
right,
right? Like, don't assume you only eat cheese sandwiches until someone's given you pizza for the love of God. So,
right,
when you're in your 40s or 50s, you just have a better sense of what works for you and what doesn't. And there's less experimentation required. I think it's always good to experiment, but I think it's hard sometimes to separate other people's expectations and like who we sort of aspire to be Like I came real close to taking an insurance sales job
Ooh.
because I felt like that's who I should be, right? I should be somebody who doesn't mind cold calling. I should be somebody who wants to build a business with reoccurring revenue, which we should all be that person. God, I wish I was, right? That's who I should be. That's not who I am.
Hmm. And that goes back to when is you. I mean, that's ooh, the expectations of others are the heaviest expectations in the world. Um, and
Especially when they're from someone who loves us and is
yeah, parents,
genuinely
spouses,
interested in our
whatever.
happiness.
Yeah,
Yeah, it
that's
takes a lot of
brutal.
guts to figure out what your guns are and then stick to them.
Uh, oh, I have so many questions for you. How do I find my genius? Let's just start with the basic one. What can I do? How do I know? Any thoughts on that, or is it just like good luck? It's
Um,
probably good luck.
well, so this year I had sort of a business plan in mind, like this thing that I was going to do, and a friend sat me down and she said, "I think that's in your zone of greatness, but not your zone of genius." Because I trust her and her words really resonated, I was like, okay, let's pump the brakes on that. Right. And so I can't tell you how everybody finds it, but I can give you some hints and I can tell you what I've been doing to try and really
Yes.
carve down to mine. So the first thing I would tell you is you can ask your friends, but not just any friend, right? Like your friends probably have a sense of what is so magical about you,
Mhm.
right? And if you look at, there are things that we do professionally that we also do personally. So I would say in my personal life, for sure, I am one of those people who around me, the truth will get told. Like I had a friend come visit me a few years ago, and I was like, just randomly, somebody I didn't know all that well, and they just popped in. I was like, you can come to Denver, hang out with me. And they did. And I was like, well, this is a little weird because I really didn't think you would. And I don't know what we're up to. Right. And it took 3 days. But by the end of the long weekend, I figured out that this person was thinking about divorcing their spouse and having an
Mm.
affair.
Oh,
That was the conversation they showed up to have.
yikes.
So intense, right? But like
Yeah.
in my personal life, around me, the truth gets told. So if somebody's being a little shady, they don't want to be friends with me. They don't want to be around me. And if you have something that's weighing on you, like maybe you need a good PC, but you haven't been able to tell anybody that, you'll gravitate towards someone like me because around me, it's going to come out. You
Yeah.
want it out,
That's
right?
why I like hanging out with you.
Good, thank you. If you ever stop, we'll know it's because you've gone bad. Um, so,
That's right.
like thinking about though what your friends really value in you, right? Like, what is
Mhm.
the? And you got to dig. I saw Simon Sinek the other day. He was like, "You really got to dig because they're going to be like, well, I'm friends with you because you're smart and you're funny." And you're like, "Yeah, but you know a lot of smart and funny people. What is it really?" And like, if you push, you can get good answers that way. The thing that I took a look at last fall when my friend had that conversation with me, because I was like, I better get really interested in what is my zone of greatness if I'm gonna, or my zone of genius, if I'm gonna avoid building a business somewhere else, right? So, zone of greatness, it's still exhausting. It's still gonna take a lot out of you, right? It's not that there's no effort in zone of genius, it's just a different kind of effort. It's an effort that fills you up. And
Mm.
so when I started looking, the question that I've been asking myself, and I'm going to swear in a second here, is whenever I think about something that might be in my zone of genius, if I instantly think to myself, that would be so fucking easy, I'm like, oh, that's probably zone of greatness or zone of genius. Sorry, I keep, oh, you have a counter. Oh, I'm so proud of myself that we're only at one. But so, I mean, I've been looking around. I'm like, what kind of stuff do I think falls into that category? And I'm like, oh, public speaking. Like, if you just told me to get on a plane and fly places and speak to people and kick ass and come home, that would be so fucking easy. I'm like,
Yeah,
game on, right? I could
same.
totally do that. And so,
I love
that
that.
kind of thing. Yeah. And so writing is really falls into that for me. So I'm, trying to sort out what that is. But I think
So
asking the question is a really important element.
it's like the life whatever stuff gives you life, and ethical and doesn't hurt anybody, right? Like Jeffrey
Yes.
Dahmer's genius zone was like eating people, so maybe don't.
Ooh, wow. This
That's just
this
dark.
wow, this escalated quickly.
I'm
Did
just
you see
saying,
that
like,
one?
everybody's got their genius, and he was so good at like that. He
Oh,
one of the best ever. Um, but
That's so weird.
All right, we'll turn it around. I just
I'm like,
that's
how did we
that
end up with Jeffrey Dunn? Is that
because
really
he we're
the
talking about
like
geniuses.
parallel?
If
We
we if you
can't
were
come up with a better parallel than
if you
Jeffrey Dahmer.
I'm just
You
well,
don't
I
know
guess my
any
point is
other
my point
successful
is as
people?
long as your genius doesn't hurt others, go do the shit out of it. Is what I'm trying to
Yes.
say. Because sometimes your
And
genius is actually not good. Like some people are really good at
yeah,
being egotistical. I mean, I guess we all
yeah,
are, but like
yeah,
some people are really good at being manipulative, and it's like that doesn't mean you should.
yeah.
Like some people are genius manipulators. You know,
Well,
Hitler.
and my friend Whitney, yeah, just stop saying the names of terrible people, please. Like, really, I'm begging you to just
All
stop.
right, all right, all right, all right.
Yeah, Alicia was on the Hitler episode. Awesome.
But
That feels
honestly, no,
that feels
no,
on
no
brand.
publicity is bad publicity.
Oh, just I'm begging you to stop, really. So my friend Whitney, changing the subject a little, she did write a book called The Sweet Spot by Whitney Walpole, Walpole. And the sweet spot is essentially it's like seven different archetypes. And looking at your combination
Mm,
helps you identify what is your zone of genius. That's not how they talk about it in the book. In the book, they're calling it your sweet spot, right? But what she would say is that when you're in your sweet spot, you never make a bigger difference. You never have a bigger impact. You never make more money. You never have more credibility. You never have a better experience than when you're in that. So, like, as an example, when I worked with her, part of what I discovered is that I think I should be sort of, I think I should write these big long reports. I think I should do elaborate plans, right? Like I should write out these huge elaborate plans. And what I've discovered is that's a thing that she calls masking, where you think you should be something. So you keep trying to do that thing, but it's not actually your sweet spot. It's not actually your zone of genius. And now what I
mm,
realize is that my magic doesn't come from writing up a 43-page plan that nobody's ever going to read and it never goes that way anyway. I'm magic in the moment. Like you
yeah.
can fly me in, drop me. So I do some prep depending on what it is I'm up to, just so I know that I'm organized and prepared. But I used to do hours and hours of preparation work and writing. I used to write these huge reports for clients that they didn't ask for, they didn't want, and they didn't read, that I hated doing and wasn't good at. And it took forever, but I was writing up my little report. And now I'm like, yeah, I don't do reports. Like I just
That's
stopped.
fascinating. You know what that zone of genius for me is? I think this interviewing thing is the more by your definition more my zone of greatness because after maybe it's just the emotional toll. 'Cause sometimes I'll do like 8 recordings in a week or something, 10, 13, and at the end I'm like, "There's those 12 PCs I just did for 2 hours each," you know. But
And if you're fully present, it's a lot.
it takes some. Well, so maybe I don't know. But for me, what like
Yeah.
I could do it and I'm good at it, and kind of what you mentioned is I don't even need to plan that much, and I could just really crush is stand up. Yeah. That
Interesting.
it gives me I mean, I think I've mentioned this on the air before, but, like, I always used to hate when basketball players or I thought not hate, but I thought it was just cliche when, you got Steph Curry or whoever, and they'd win the game and blah, and the interview would come up and, "How did you won?" Like, and they always say something like, when I was a kid, I knew that this was gonna be and this is gonna be my life," and, like, that cheesy answer of, "I always knew that I was born to do this," type of
Yeah.
answer. And I always thought, cheesy. I mean, dude, you practice and you're 6'8" and that helps, right? Or whatever. But then I did stand up for the first time. And I remember the joy and like the feeling of getting someone to laugh specifically. And then when I got off stage and what that did for me. And I was like, oh, I see. That's what they feel when they play basketball or
So what
whatever.
you're
Like,
saying
I
is
see.
I ruined the Ponytails podcast because then after that, Andres quit, but now he's a very famous and very happy stand-up comedian.
Something like that. I mean, Joe Rogan does both. Maybe I can do both. But the point is, I like, I get it. I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
Like that, there's a feeling of like, I don't care how tired I am, how hungry I am, how much money they would pay me. I mean, ideally, if they could pay me and that's all I could do, great. But like, generally speaking, when I do that, I feel, and for the sake of the cliche, home.
Mhm.
I feel like
Yeah.
this is
That's
me.
good.
I could do this forever. I could this is that stage and that microphone. You give me a mic. I don't need no instruments. You just give me a crowd
Yeah.
of people willing to listen, and by the end of it, they're going to be laughing. I promise, because I'm
Yeah.
funny, and I know
Yeah.
that because people have laughed at me, or because of me, I guess.
Yeah. I feel
So I
like
get
you
that.
could, and not in a cocky way, but the truth is, I feel like you could put me up against anybody else that does something remotely similar to what I do, and I'm one of the best in the world.
Yeah, I would agree with that. From knowing you, I would agree with that. Yeah, because like, you're, like, in the Simon Sinek kinda level, by the way, like, the way I see you, like, that's world class, master class coaching on how to, like, because and again, and this is probably a good distinction, and not to, belittle people who do coaching,
Yeah, there's a
like,
lot of great people.
right, and there's different people that need different kinds of coaching, so it's not even always like a
Yes.
sales coach or a business coach, it could be like a life coach or whatever, but in the niche that you have, with who you are and how you approach it and how you look at it, I don't know that there's much competition for you specifically. I agree. I would agree with that because just you're just so you touched it. You're direct, and oftentimes if you're the CEO of a fast growing company that's a good person, odds are like most people are just too nervous to be truthful to you about what you need to hear because you're a nice person and you are relatively successful. And so it's like hard to say, "Hey,
Or you're
Steve."
their boss. You write their paycheck.
Yeah. So it's like hard to, but when you come in, you're like, "This is what you need to do. Cut this bullshit and do that." It, I I would love to see someone who goes no to you. Like it's especially even before they hire you. You know what I'm saying? Like that's
Yeah,
probably so. I would agree with you that with even the stuff that you shared with me and following so many different people that you're like I said, Simon Sinek's and you're people who probably work in the same area at the same level that you do. You're in that elite force for sure, no doubt.
thank
Good
you.
job. Yeah, you
I,
kick
and I
ass.
think I think the more you get into your zone of genius and you stop trying to be other things, right? Like even right now, I'm really tempted to go write a big, long, elaborate plan for the next phase of my business, and I keep being like, every time I get that urge, I'm like, no, we're not going to do that. We're going to do the in the moment things. That's the thing that's going to make the biggest difference.
That's your
And I
jelly.
and I think the other thing that, as I've had conversations with people that I've distinguished, is that I'm not a tips and tricks kind of person. Although I do know tips and I, do have tricks, I'm a deeper truth kind of person.
Yeah.
And that I think the more you get into your zone of genius, the harder it is to find competition. And what my friend Whitney would say is that who's going to show up is what she calls constituents. So the idea is there are some people who are just looking for what you got. So if you get really good at knowing what you've got and making sure that they can see it, right? Putting it on display instead of putting, like I really literally for a long time I thought people were hiring me because I'm smart, and I wanted to like prove it by writing big reports and knowing all this
Mm,
stuff and doing fancy things. And it was really interesting the day that I was like, fancy things are not what people need. Like when I work with a new team, especially in that specific niche, right? They are trying to learn a different language and play a sport they've never played. So it's a little bit like imagine going into your company and you're trying to teach your team how to play cricket in Russian.
right.
You got to keep
Rough.
that as simple as humanly possible. You're not talking about complex offensive strategies. You're talking about whatever the hell the basics of cricket are, right?
Yeah.
Because you need them to develop a small working vocabulary and then you build from there. I used to think I had to come in with all this sophisticated stuff. Even if I could do that, which it's a zone of greatness, it's not a zone of genius. This is where the biggest difference gets made. It's in the basics, right? You want to be a good
Yeah.
basketball player, learn to shoot, learn to pass, learn to dribble. If you can't do those things, nothing else is going to matter, right?
Yeah. Exactly
So,
right. You don't need a dunk if you know how to dribble and shoot, as Steph Curry has proven. On that note, it's funny because this kind of touches back a little bit to at the beginning where we talked about like the fundamentals. Like if you get the basics down, then you can start tailoring it. But I don't know if this is accurate or not. But someone once told me that Vince Lombardi would always start before the season started, before like the first team practice that they would have with professional football players that were like elite athletes, he would start and go, "Gentlemen, this is a football," and just that he would do that to hound on how important the fundamentals were before we started
yeah.
working on these. He would just start and go, "This is a football, and we're trying to get it to that line over there." And it's almost like insulting to the professionals, but it's like, no, 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 no. I guarantee you, a lot of you, there's some of the fundamentals that you don't have down that you haven't had to have down because
Yes.
you are really, really elite in this other aspect, but you need to be
Yes.
good at all of the things that are basic.
Yep.
In Southwestern, it's get your 30 demos, or at the very least know how to give a good demo, because 30
Yep.
demos don't count for shit if 20 of them were just like a open the door, open the book and close it. Talk about like really showed someone the books, right? You're talking
Mhm.
about your schedule, we're talking about your attitude, right? The
Yep.
fundamentals. And it sounds so it sounds so basic. It sounds so basic, but a lot of people just, if you even don't have one of those things down, you can't be elite. You can't be a star. It just
And
doesn't work.
I think we run away from the boring work. You got to do the
Yeah.
boring work, right? Like sometimes when I meet book people, they'll be like, "Oh my god, how did you learn to talk like that? How'd you?" I'm like, "5 summers, baby." But there's a lot of truth to that, right? Like I spent a lot of hot, sticky Sundays talking to an idiot first year with their head in such a dark place, right? And
Yeah.
that's the boring work, right? Like there's some mastery, you got to do the boring stuff. I mean, when I did different leadership development programs, it's a lot of time sitting in a chair, like learning new concepts, practicing new concepts. But mastery is, people ask me, they're like, well, how did you get so good at like taking an idea and just like putting it into a sound bite nugget kind of thing, right? And I think you can always get better at that. I don't think I'm the best at that at all, but we did a thing in my company for 5 years. We did this thing called the Daily Dose of Maverick, and it was a 2-minute audio blurb that came out 5 days a week. And it's so funny because it actually started because a client of mine in New York called me one day and left me the funniest voicemail. She's like, she'd seen me speak at a conference and then hired me as a coach. And she's like, I want more Alecia Huck. When my phone rings, I want it to be you yelling at me. Like, she's just this amazing, funny, generous, charming woman. And she's like, I want audio every day. And I was like, yeah, let me get right on that. And then my friend Tammy hacked the whole thing, set it all up. So for 5 years, 5 days a week, you could get this little 2-minute audio blurb in your inbox. That is a ton of recording time. Like
Yeah.
sometimes I could crank out 10 of them in one sitting. Sometimes one of them took me 15 tries. So now if I do a video on LinkedIn or something, I have all the boring work behind me, right? I built that muscle. I
Yeah.
learned something, right?
You
Like
pay the dues.
you've done 1,000 interviews. Now you're a better interviewer. And I think sometimes we want to skip ahead to the sexy part, right? Like everybody wants to talk about Bezos, the cajillionaire, sending whatever to the moon. Let's think about what it was like when he was in a garage and everybody was like, "You're out of your damn mind if you think they're going to buy books from the internet,"
Yeah, when there's a bookstore right there.
right?
Yeah. And now when we go sell books, they're like, we have the internet.
You're like, "So do I. I have stuff on the internet. Game on."
That's so
Yeah.
funny. This is amen to that. A change of a gear question, but I wrote this down in my head.
You wrote it
So
down in your head?
in my head, I wrote it down inside my head, literally. Um, okay, big distinction here because some people might be listening and they have a small business. It's not a fast growing company yet. These principles, generally speaking, will apply to them. But there is a difference between, hey, I just have a startup, or hey, we're making 100,000 revenue, which is nothing to nothing to balk at. I mean, that's a pretty solid revenue stream. But you're going from minimum 5 million to $200 million companies that are trying to grow.
Yeah.
So the question is, before companies can even make it to $5 million revenue, they'll, for whatever reason or another, they fall apart, they don't work out, they don't survive, right?
Mhm.
What are some of the things that are like that you've noticed within all your clients who are already at that stage where it's like, okay, we've survived, right?
Mhm.
We got something happening. We're not gonna run it, we're not gonna we're not worrying about the overhead costs anymore.
Right.
We're pro, you know, what
Profitable.
works? Yeah, we're profitable. What do they have in common? Is there like a one or two things that they have in common that it's like the ones that make it this far, they for sure have this, or they don't have
Mhm.
that?
Yeah. Um, that's such a great question. I love that. Um, One, I would say they know how to make money. I know that that's like a stupid, right?
it,
But
it but it's basic, but it works.
I mean, listen, if you started your business and you've got one bluebird client and they're 90% of your revenue, I would argue you don't actually know how to make money. And
Yeah.
if you have like the problem is a big pile of money can cover up a whole bunch of sins. And so sometimes you see companies where they don't actually have a clear understanding of how money is generated and stays inside their company. So you got to understand how you're going to make money. Where are you going to get customers? How are you going to convert them? What's that? Like what's you actually have to get good at that. That's why I don't work with companies with cash flow problems. Like if you haven't figured out how to make money, I can't help you. Or at least I'm probably not even going to be willing to try because how to make money is not my jam. If you need help with that, that's a different person. So they understand how they make money. The other, and
So
it's so interesting. Well, there's so many different types of personalities that start businesses, right? And what I would say is you can get by for a long time on willpower and personality,
good. Mm,
but you can't get by forever. Willpower runs out, and personality, once you get big enough, it doesn't matter, as it doesn't have the same weight anymore. So
mm.
when you're small, if you know how to make money, and the second thing is you're smart enough to keep track, like to really keep a control on your costs, right? You got
Boom.
to actually watch the money that's there. So in an inverted way, I'll tell you a quick, very awesome story. Usually when I'm at cocktail parties, the most interesting question I found to ask is, so what's the weirdest thing you've seen?
Mm.
So I was
Great,
with a
great
bunch of
question.
mergers and acquisition nerds, right? So lawyers and accountants. And one of the lawyers goes, okay, so years ago, I worked with this company, and it was three guys from college who had started a company, and it was going really super well. And they're raising a lot of money, and like or not raising a lot of money, they're making a lot of money, and they're getting ready to sell. So they're probably at about 30, 40 annual million annual revenue. And one of them is kind of a slacker. Like he's off doing his own thing. He's not really contributing anymore, but they don't really care because they're valued at maybe 30, 40, 40 million. They're all going to cash out. Who cares, right? During the due diligence phase, they found that he had been making excessive charges, personal charges, to his corporate Amex card.
Oh shit.
Trips to Vegas, imagine what you will. But the best thing, the one thing he bought that really I will never forget as long as I live, the guy bought a Batmobile on his corporate card. And right, so just imagine the balls that that takes, right? But here's the thing, nobody noticed. He was able to charge a damn Batmobile and nobody even noticed. So you gotta know how to make
Wow.
money, but you also have to keep track of your damn money. If you don't control costs, right? If you don't watch that side of the house, you'll never make it to that point.
Amen. Accountants and lawyers pay for themselves. They're never too
Oh my God.
expensive.
Get a controller, get a CFO, get a fractional CFO. By the way, if you think you can run your company because we have enough money in the account to make payroll, you're in for big trouble very soon. And your CFO is not there to make sure your taxes get paid. Your CFO is there to do analysis on your books to help you figure out where you're making money and where you're losing money. I had a
Amen.
client one time, they got a new CFO because I'm usually brought in about the same time the first real CFO gets there. That's a good way to know. And they found that they had been underpricing their top selling product to the tune of $1.5 million that year. So they
Oops.
lost 1.5 million because they didn't put the right pricing on their top selling item. And a few
Brutal.
years later, when a recession hit and they had to lay people off, that money would have come in real handy.
That's brutal. That's a great answer. So this kind of echoes a little bit what Patrick Dichter. We had Patrick on here.
I
Do
love
you
Pat.
remember Patrick? He's
I love
great.
Pat Victor.
He is great.
Yeah.
He's someone I'm
He's
like,
an
we need to
accountant
yeah.
now.
I was like, we need to get him on the EE podcast.
That would be awesome. He'd be great.
Now he would be great. But it's kind of what he said because he acquires companies, right? But I was like, what's the biggest thing? He goes, nobody. If a company even remotely seems like they don't have their books in order or they don't know where their money's at, like if and he had like specific questions he asks him
Yep.
and stuff. But if the answer to any of those is ever like not sure or they even have to
Run
think
away.
about it, go the other way. So,
And by
I
the
mean,
way, you're going to need a loan at some point. You don't think you will, but like if your company takes off and you actually start growing, you're going to need a loan and you can't get one if your books are all shady and weird.
yeah, yep. It's just knowing,
Whole thing.
and this is different than low expenses because sometimes you have to have expenses, and sometimes it's more of an investment in, like, for example, for us, like,
Sometimes the problem is you're not spending enough money.
yeah, to
Like
like get to the point,
there's
yeah.
things you should be doing that you're not doing, and because of that, this isn't going to work.
This is a good segue. This is a good segue. But anyway, it just echoed what he said, is just get your shit together when it comes to your books. Don't mess with that. Why would you mess with that? That's the literal bloodline
Yeah.
of your business. For you,
Cash,
it's your
by the
schedule. For
way,
your company, is that?
you want to think about cash like it's oxygen in space.
Yeah.
Cash in a fast growing company is like oxygen in outer space. Know how much you got, know how much you're using, know how fast you're using it, know how much, like, you got to know. No guessing, no hoping, no estimating, no gut instinct. And by the way, the fact that your sister's nephew does your books, right? Or your best friend from college's wife is your controller or your bookkeeper, get real people in those jobs. You need them.
Yeah. Yeah. Um. So good. On that note, when you talk about stuff that you don't spend enough money on, and something we didn't really get taught to do while we were selling books is marketing, because usually
Yeah.
that's an expense that's either you're spending too much or not enough. Few companies are spending the right amount. Uh,
Mhm.
Half of it is because it's a crapshoot when it comes to, like, how who you hire for that. But this is a good tangent onto the change you made recently that I'm excited to talk to you about, because you hadn't met your marketing team the last time I talked to you, and I've met them,
Yeah.
and they're fucking awesome. They're, like,
Right?
really,
That's
really
number
nice.
3. That's number 3.
Yeah, I love it. Oh, yeah,
They
yeah,
are fucking awesome.
yeah. Alright, there we go. So
Nobody's gonna believe this is my episode if the fuck count is that low.
yeah, that is 5 technically. Yeah, look at that. Um, okay, so can you tell me a little bit about how you ran into these ladies, the process, and why I just put that back on the screen. The thought process, why and how you discovered them.
Yeah.
What the heck is happening? I don't even know. Anyway, can you talk
So
a little bit about that?
yeah, so sort of as a word of caution to other entrepreneurs, I've met with all kinds of marketing people. I've hired other marketing people and just not had it be amazing. One of the things that I find really frustrating is that not all marketers know how to make the business case. So you're not spending marketing money to make shit look pretty. That's not the point. You're spending marketing money to make more money.
Yes.
So, like, when I went to get my logo designed, right? People would always be like, here's a page full of pretty logos that I did. And I was like, that's not helpful at all. What I need to see is what did they come to you with? What was their idea in the beginning? What questions did you ask them, right? What were your first drafts like? How did you narrow it down from there? What makes what you came up with the best possible thing for them? You don't know, do you? Because what you did was make something pretty. Good for you. I'm not giving you money for that, right? So people do vanity metrics in social media, right? Oh, I have a client right now. She's like, a marketing company came in, their focus was on increasing followers, but they never managed to convert the followers into cash. So what good was all of that time and energy in cash,
Nothing.
right?
Absolutely
And
nothing.
sometimes you got to experiment, right? Like you got to try things. What I liked about this marketing company in particular was they didn't say, which most say, they're like, "Ooh, here's what we do for all our clients, and it's amazing. We should do it for you. And if you write us a big check, we will." What these guys said was, based on what you've shared about your company, here's our recommendations for your company that were really different than anything else anybody had ever shared. So
Hmm.
that's why I hired them. And you may need something different. And listen, when it comes time to do like a brand refresh, it's great to find people who are really good at that and let them execute for you. Right. And I have had a marketing company do some competitive analysis to try and figure out who were what was my competition and what was different about me, which they found out. They're like, you don't really have a lot of competition, and which isn't, I don't think that's true anymore, by the way. But they're like, you have sort of an edge that most people in your industry don't. I'm like, that's because
Yeah.
I'm not an old white guy. Like, and I love old white guys. They're really awesome humans, and a lot of them are amazing consultants, but it was different. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. You
Um,
were
they don't,
refreshing.
yeah, they don't say fuck. And the people I
Yeah.
work with usually do.
That's right. Fuck yeah, they do.
So it was fun working with the marketing team. And so they came up with some really specific, oh, you got to 8 and you got to 9. That was really good. You snuck it in there. They came up with a couple of things that I really, really liked. So I did a 2-day mastermind and we just camped out, and I wanted a reheater campaign for my existing network, something to generate leads ongoingly, and then a product, right? So here's what they came. Do you want me to share what they came up
Yeah,
with?
this is
Is that
fascinating.
useful? Okay. And I'm sure people will copy this because it's such a good idea. So they were like, the first thing they wanted to do for the reheater campaign, we're calling it a night with Alecia Huck, which if you at first they were calling it an evening with Alecia, and I was like, that sounds a little inappropriate. Like, I don't. What are we selling here again? I'm
It sounds
confused.
like you started at OnlyFans or something.
Yeah, yeah, right. Creepy and a little weird. So I'm like, let's go with an evening with Alecia Huck. That sounds less sketchy. But they're like, people, when they're with you, then they get what you do, and then that puts them in the pipeline. So what we're going to do is, it's in mid-October, by the way. So if anybody wants to come, we're going to take CEOs, owners, and founders, be exclusively for them. So I'll have some of my current and past clients that fit that category, and a bunch of new people. And we'll do like a half-day session where I'll walk them through. You know how you never have time to like sit and actually think over your entire business and do the
Yeah.
big picture work? So it'll be
Yeah.
like a long afternoon where we do the big picture work, and I'll specifically teach people a little bit about infrastructure and help them identify 1 or 2 high value targets. Like, these are projects that would make a big difference inside your company if you did them. And they'll get a chance to sort of complete 2023 and put it to bed and say, this is what matters before the end of the year and in 2024. They'll get to do that in a room full of people who actually get it. Because I have a lot of people that either inherited a family business, bought the family business, right? There's multiple generations to deal with. They started it themselves and all those growing pains. So you get to be in a room full of people who actually get it. We'll do that. And then we'll do a really, really amazing gourmet meal with like a flight of scotches or something cool at the end. And then you
Damn.
fly home the next day. So I was like, oh, that sounds fucking great. Like, I want to go to that. I'll do that. I'll lead that. Let's have that be the thing, right? So for people who have already worked with me or are working with me, it's free. And then for everybody else, it's like $12.75. But I was like, that feels like a fit, right?
That's
Fly
sick.
in, fly out. Isn't that cool?
That is
And
cool.
then because we used to do the daily dose of Maverick, and one of the marketing team, she was like, what you should do is a video text subscription. So some people know me from LinkedIn. I haven't put videos up in a long time because I've been focused on my zone of genius and taking a little break. But instead of doing a newsletter or something like that, we're actually just going to do a text subscription. So every week, probably maybe twice a week, you'll get a text with a video from me, something short, sweet, under 2-3 minutes, that like gets to the heart of something. Like, if you watch it, that'll be valuable for you in your life and what you're up to, especially if you're trying to run a company and build a business. And I was like, oh, that's so much better than
Right.
newsletters, which I hate and think are so dumb.
Yeah,
And then
that
we're
works.
going to do a journal that will be like smart questions to ask yourself. So if you're an owner, you just pick any random page, look at one question, take 10 minutes, answer the question, right? Like, a good example would be, who is somebody you need to have a conversation with to hold them accountable for something they're not doing that you haven't been talking to? Like, where do you need to hold somebody accountable and you haven't been doing it? Write that down and then go have that conversation. So the idea is to give you a resource to just help you be a little bit better, do something. Like, if you're not sure what to do, because a lot of times as an owner, CEO, there's just so much going on. So these are small things that you can do, but really high powered things at your level. And then here's the thing that I thought was so cool. We're not doing the journal to do the journal. We're doing the journal so one of my marketing team can analyze the results and figure out what resonates best with my niche customers, and we can go after more of them. It's
Absolutely.
like,
So
so you're telling me
whatever
we're
pain points. Yeah.
gonna sell this thing so that we get better data? Like that's I was like, this is amazing. This feels like a Maverick thing to do.
Really cool. Damn. Look
I
at
know,
you
I'm really
go.
excited. I've never had a marketing plan that I felt like I could have confidence in and was excited about. I've tried lots of different things that people told me would be smart. Networking till you want to die. Like I'm an introvert, I'm charming, but I don't want to be in a room full of 100 people
What?
at all, right? It just didn't work,
So good.
right? I wrote an article even, it's called Death by Coffee about networking and how if you're going to do it, here's a smarter way to do it instead of just going to coffee with 8 million people and not getting new business. And some people are great at it and they always get new business. I don't know, I'm not one of them. It doesn't work for me.
That's hilarious. Oh man, that's so good. I appreciate this insight. This is like I'm taking notes right here.
I'm not sure
Um
how useful it is to other people or,
oh no,
but
are you kidding me? No, this is
I'm
good
happy.
stuff. Just like good stuff to think about. I mean, if people are listening and they're even pondering some of the things that we're discussing or have their own opinions, even if they're different than ours, good because that we're
Yeah.
doing the thing where we're making them think about this kind of stuff instead of
You win as you,
jumbo.
I'll win
Yeah,
as me.
yeah. Um, one last question about this, and then we can get into some like maybe some book stuff. Talk a little bit about
Sure.
your Southwestern stuff. Um, I love asking this question, but what are questions? What my form is always, what am I not asking you that I should be? But I'm not your client, so what is a question that your clients kind of fail to ask you that they should be, or
Yeah.
like someone who's like in this spot should be asking someone like you specifically?
Yeah. There's a lot of fun technical things that you could ask me, but I think the game is usually won by winning your inner game. So I think the most important question to ask somebody like me is, what does it really take? Like, what does it
Ooh,
really take to grow a business and keep growing a business and run a team? And, if some of us remember Bill Zizzy, right? Like, it takes headache, heartbreak, like, all those different
yeah.
things. The truth is in business, and part of the reason I love being an entrepreneur is because every time I level up, my business levels up. And every time my business levels up, I have to level up too. So you have this very
Oof.
immediate kind of scoreboard, right? And there's always a new set of challenges, right? So like whatever you think when you got 5 people and 100,000 in revenue or whatever, it's a whole different ball game when you hit X, right? Like every time you level up, just like when you're playing a video game, right? Like you master level 3 and then you get to level 4 and you're an idiot again. You're like, "Oh my
Yeah.
god, this is so but I was just a master. I want to go back to level 3." But you can't. That's not how life works, right? And the truth is, if you're at level 3 for too long, you get bored. So you got to keep upping your game in some way, shape, or form. And I had a client once when we were all done and they produced amazing results. He was a fourth generation family owned business, worked super hard. All the guys on his team had worked super hard. They were an amazing bunch of people. And at the very end, I was asking him, what was this like for you? And he said, you said it would be hard because I didn't realize how hard it would be because
Mm,
whatever your natural comfort zone, inclination, default way of behaving, we're going to interrupt all of that. That's what leveling up looks like, right? You got to interrupt everything you're used to and what your instincts say. So we still want you to be true to you, but it's still going to be disruptive to get a major change because you have to disrupt what's so to have it be different.
mhm.
And that's hard. I think we tend to think about personal growth like we always imagine these beautiful pictures of people in white linen doing yoga on a beach in Costa Rica, right at sunset, and it's all glorious. Really, it's personal growth always sounds good when you're talking about it, you're not in it. But what it's really like in real life is more like, Wile E. Coyote taking a frying pan to the face. Like it's always something you didn't realize you needed to work on, right? Or that's the, oh God, it's still that? Like I'm still dealing with me and my temper after all these years? That's crazy. I've done all this work and I just was rude to my it's the silliness of it, but it's worth it because you have to deal with you, but the hardest thing is you have to deal with you. And the other thing I would say is that you got to be prepared to have your heart broken. People are going to leave, they're going to quit, somebody's going to steal from you, somebody's going to sue you, maybe all of the above.
Mhm.
Um, and not because you're a bad person or even because they're a bad person. It's part of just what people do. Like if you're in business long enough, somebody will steal from you and somebody will sue from you. It's not a question of whether or not it will happen, it's when and how much. And them's just the facts. It's just like cancellations when you sold books. And just like cancellations hurt a little, a lot if it was a cool family, it's worse when you're recruiting and the person you've invested all this time and energy in walks out the door and in some cases goes across the street and starts a business that now competes with yours.
Hmm. That is
So
good.
you got to put your heart in it
Ooh.
and it might get twisted up.
It's not they don't ask how hard what's it actually gonna take? How hard is it actually gonna be? And the thing is, what makes you great one of the things that make you great is you tell them. You'll tell them true. This is everything that needs to happen. Otherwise,
Yeah.
have fun being at level 3, bro. Boom.
It's cool. And you may need to stay at level 3 for a while. Listen, not every year of your life is the year to go to level 10. Like it's
Yeah.
okay to be at level 3, right? If you consciously choose that, it's growth does not everybody needs to go public or run $100 million company,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
That's the other thing. Win is you is also about figuring out what success really looks like for you. Maybe it's that you get to leave the office every day at 4 and you're coaching your kids' t-ball team. Like
Yeah.
winning is again not just your results but also your experience and the experience of the people around you. So just like when we sold books, I think intentionality wins all the games. What do you really want? What do you plan on do to get it? How much closer can you get this year? If you're not, that's part of what we all loved about Southwestern, right? Somebody asked those questions.
Yeah. It's the
We
first
did.
time a lot of people ask those questions, yeah.
Mhm.
Also with that, what you just said is important. Like one of the things someone a long time ago asked me, like, "What do you want the podcast to get to?" And I go, honestly, I don't know that I would want this thing to me. Like, do we want to be? Is it even like worth it to aim to be like, let's be like Joe Rogan, where we make $100 million from Spotify, and it's like that would be cool. But honestly, like, I don't know that we need that. Lately we started doing it. We started saying, "Hey, I just want to set a goal for the podcast that's a control. Like I can look back and be like,
Realistic. Yeah.
I did that, right? Because sometimes when we in the book, we'd be like, I'm going to sell 10,000 units, and it's like, well, I mean, that's you probably can, and a lot of people have it, but if you don't have car problems, or if you have car problems, I don't care how good you're at selling books, right? Or if you have PR problems, like those are things that get in the way and take up maybe not all 10,000 units away, but it'll take 1,000
Right.
units away. So you sold 9,000, right?
Yeah.
Some of the stuff is not in your control, but so like one of the things we decided lately was we're going to get to 1,000 episodes, and whatever we need to do to make ourselves get to that more efficiently,
Yeah.
that's when we'll start. And then at 9.99 we'll look up and go, should we do another 500, or is that is that all the tales that we needed to tell? I
Mm.
don't know, but
Love that. I love that you're going to ask that question instead of just leaving it open ended or picking a number that you don't actually care about. That's brilliant.
yeah, because it's like, I mean, it's like we make money, right? We get to have sponsors and stuff, but at some point it's like, I mean, do I want to make it like this is a $500,000 company or whatever? It's like, what does that even mean? I can't even wrap my head around that. I can wrap my head around 1,000 episodes,
Mhm.
right? And I can tell you that after talking to so many people, we'll have enough popularity because enough people have been on here that more people have heard of us.
Yeah.
That we'll see where we're at money wise and stuff. But I know we can do 1,000, and we can control 100%
Yep.
if we can get 1,000 out. So I don't know. Anyway, I love that you said that because it's like just defining success is the important part. And to me, if I talk to 1,000 people doing this, that's a successful podcast, and we can go from there.
Well, and I
All right.
feel like you reinvigorated sort of the alumni community, right? Like
Yeah.
I don't think it's an accident we had another reunion this year. I love that you're doing the Bizzler, which by the way, I'm so mad that I can't go on because I have a stupid wedding. Like, I mean, but like the time that we spent at the reunion actually with book people, like, my friend Clint Taylor was saying, like, with people you develop these relationships with at a key point in your life and you have all this shared history. And I still can't figure out what is so unique about Southwestern. I think
Yeah.
it's something about the coaching that we gave each other, right? And the way we were trained to like assume that position of authority and go into a room and train a bunch of people or train one person. but it is unique and it is valuable. And for sure, that's part of what I loved about being on your show the first time. I was like, oh my God, it was fun talking about that stuff. Like, I feel more alive. That's a part of who I am. And even though I still keep in touch with a lot of book people, that's not always how we talk. And
Yeah.
being on executive exercises has been great. Like, dude, if you're not talking to 4 other book people every couple weeks, you're missing the boat, man. Just find 4 others that will talk to you.
Yeah.
That's a good thing.
It's a lot of fun every time. It's like, I look
Mhm.
forward to those episodes a lot. I look forward to just being able to yeah, it's fun.
Yeah.
Um, anyway, okay. All right, let's switch some gears into, some Southwestern stuff and just kinda talk about your 5 summers really, really, like, briefly, because like I said, if you guys wanna hear a lot more of the details of the stories, we got some stories that we need to tell here today, but, you know, I always like to I'll for sure include, how did you first get into Southwestern? And then I'll ask you some of the highlights of your 5 summers, but
Yeah.
I always like the origin story.
Oh, yeah. So my origin story is I was a freshman at the University of South Dakota, the Harvard of the Midwest, which might be a little facetious there. And so I'm in my dorm room in Julian Hall, and I get this panicked phone call from my good friend Erin Indahl. And the phone call goes something like this. She's like sobbing uncontrollably for 2 minutes. I figure out that it's her because of caller ID, right? This was before cell phones. And
Man.
finally, I get her calmed down enough that she lets out a sentence that I can actually understand. And she says, I got a great summer job. And so I'm talking to her about it, and she's telling me about this weird company that recruited her, and she's going to go be a door to door salesman in, South Carolina or something. And the whole time I'm thinking, this is a scam. This is totally a scam. I got to get Erin out of this. It's totally a scam. But if it's not a scam, I'm going to go do that.
It's one of the 2.
So I go into the interview, and one of the guys in the back of the room, I'm like, he looks really familiar. So when I was a freshman in my high school, in Spearfish High School, there was a senior named Neil Renner. And Neil had Bon Jovi hair, like legit, the full on old Bon Jovi, right? Like 80s and 90s Bon Jovi, like big, long, gorgeous rocker hair. And he was this hot senior when I was a little freshman that I never talked to because he was Neil Renner, right? And I go into my interview, and in the back of the room, I swear to God, is a buzz cut version of Neil Renner. And I'm so confused by this. Like, why is Neil Renner here? And did he sell books? Like, what's happening? I can't even tell, right? Turns out Neil Renner did sell books, and then so did I. And so I sat in the interview, and the whole, he basically dismissed everybody in the room except like me and one other person. My friend Dave was sitting next to me in the interview, and at the end he looked at me and he goes, "This is insane." And I was like, "I'm totally doing this." So like my thing
Or
when
you're a pony.
oh my God, when I talk to book kids, I'm like, how many of you think you got recruited? Because we teach kids that they can recruit, right? Which is not
Yeah.
really true. I go, did you get recruited, or were you just the kind of person who was going to sell books? And they're like, well, I'm just the kind of person that was. I'm like, yeah. So I was just the kind of person that was going to sell books, and Dave wasn't. And so I went and sold books, and he
Done.
didn't, right? But yeah,
That's so
I
funny. What was it really? Like, I always like to ask. Everybody says, "Oh, the travel, the money, the
yeah,
thing," but, like, what drew you?
I
Was
wouldn't have to go home
underneath?
for the yeah. It was that I wouldn't have to go home for the summer.
Whoa.
I
Yeah, you kinda touched
didn't.
on this earlier. You just didn't
Yeah,
like being home.
I didn't come from an easy background, and there were some dynamics at home that were pretty intense and unhealthy. And college was like, it was a lot of freedom for me. I went to school 8 hours away from where my parents lived, right? And I didn't, I still went home and visited and all that other kind of stuff, and I still missed home, but I didn't want to go home for the summer. And this gave me a way to not do that and to make enough money to pay for school, which I definitely needed.
Not today,
And I think
Spearfish.
And I think I was the kind of kid who was going to go sell books, right? Like I like what I say to
You were a
now
pony.
when they bring me into spring production meetings and they have me talk, I go, or even earlier in the year and they have me talk about recruiting. Yeah, I am a pony. I say things like, I'm like, you guys, if you like, if I was running interviews today, my interviews would be totally different than the ones I ran back on campus. Like if I was doing it now, if I was like floating people or in an interview, I'd be like, hey, you, you like hard things? And if they said yes, I'd be like, come with me.
Follow me now.
Like that's it, right? That's the only, every time you're in a room full of book people, if you just ask who in here kind of likes hard things, every hand will go up because we're all crazy in the same way. So
Yes.
why, like, I don't think we persuade people to go sell books. I think we bump into people who like hard things and we don't completely blow it in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah, I mean, we're ponies, right? It's funny because we never thought of it like when you heard the story of the ponytails. Ponies were always people who bought books, or specifically, ponies were people who bought a lot of books, right? When you leave a house and they bought the whole package, and you'd be like, oh, they were total pony or whatever.
A really
But
good thing that happened after a whole lot of not really good things.
yeah, right. But we are that. We were those people. We were the buyers in that. There was
Mhm.
once the information came across, and of course it needed to be presented in a nice way. Thanks, Megan Baker, for doing that, right? Generally speaking, right? But once I understood, hey, you're leaving Nebraska, you could make money, but more than anything, this is hard and people suck at it, but you might not. And it's going to change your life, or it's going to be like that's the general message of the info session. If the people who have the radio on in that frequency, which is all of us that did it, like
Mhm.
we're ponies. We're ponies for that specific product, and we were. And that's why this is ponytails because we were the ponies. Like,
Oh, I like that.
yeah, it's you're the
Yeah.
pony and telling your tale. Not
Oh,
because
and then
people.
sidebar, funny story. So Virgie Sanford and I went
Oh
to
yeah,
junior high, high school, and college together. And she didn't tell me this until like 5 years ago. Okay. So we were on the same team our first summer. We had a number one team in the company. It was a really big deal. And we had worked together for like 10, 15 years down in Texas. She would fly me in every year and I'd work with her and her teams. And she never told me this story until like 5 years ago. I fly down to do something for her. I was in Texas anyway, and they had their spring production. So I popped in and I hear her tell this story. She says, you guys, when I was a freshman at the University of South Dakota, I was walking down the hall one day and one of my friends bumped into me and said, hey, Virgie, by the way, I'm doing this door to door book thing. And if they call you, you should do it too. And then kept on going to class. And she said, because that friend told her that they were doing it, that gave her the confidence that she could do it too. And that's part of why she went and sold books. And that friend, as it turns out, happens to be Alecia Huck, which she never told me until 5 years ago.
wow.
And what she never says, because she's all classy and awesome, is that once she had gotten selected to be on our team, a few weeks later, I went to our boss, Jeff Hahn, and I said, Jeff, Virgie's kind of flighty. Like, I just don't think she's cut out for this. Like, I don't think she's going to do well. And we're trying to have a number one team. So I don't think she should be on our team. Like, I think you should cut her loose. And Jeff was like,
Oh shit.
no, Alicia, I got it. And then, by the way, Virgie went on to crush it. She
Yeah.
was number two first year in the company that year. She killed me every single year in every single category for the 5 summers we both sold.
And she's legendary. Like she
Yes.
would be in
And
the Mount Rushmore of DSMs.
she never tells this. She always tells the nice story about Alicia. She never tells the story where I tried to get her fired.
The
I
impact
don't
that a
think
lot
she
of
can
people would
handle
not have
this.
had.
Oh my God, right? Yeah, just goes to
Wow.
show, just don't be so cocky, right?
Incredible. I mean, that's crazy. That's a great story. I did not know that. That
Mhm.
is a
Yeah.
wonderful story. Um, damn. Okay. So as you think back on your 5 summers, we didn't get to talk much, or I guess we talked some, but uh, when you look, what were you the most proud of like the moments throughout the your career at Southwestern? As you look back and you're like, hey, I'm glad that this is something I did. Or I look back on this. I mean, it might have changed over the years. Like I was used to be glad that I was in the pace setter, but it's like now I'm like, who gives a shit? Like I'm proud of
Oh,
this now.
dude. I know
Now that
exactly
you
what
look
it
at
is.
it, what is that thing?
Yeah. So, it was, I think my fourth summer, we were selling in Missouri outside of St. Louis. And I had probably, I think, my best summer ever that year, but that wasn't the thing I was most proud of. I'd kind of gotten a reputation as somebody who was good to PC people who were sucking wind or had gotten off schedule, like to help them actually get back on schedule.
Of course.
Yeah. They were sending all the high performers to somebody else, and I was like pulling teeth, like, hey, I'm sorry your girlfriend dumped you. You still got a job to do, nerd. Um, a little different than that, right? But that year, one of our first years was this really amazing kid named Norm. And his nickname was Norm. I don't know why, but he was sweet. He was a little bit round, right? Like he used to say things like, moms love me, daughters not so much. He was just
Yes.
very self-effacing, right? And he'd been doing okay, right? It's
Sorry,
just
it's just so
he
good.
was so charming. He was so charming. Anyway, so he at one point in the summer he got a little bit off schedule, right? And we figured it out looking at his stats. So Jeff Hahn sent me in to PC Norm, and my job that Sunday was to PC Norm, get him to admit that he'd been off schedule, like come clean, and then get back on track, right? So we were at this mall, and I took him way over in this corner of the food court so we could be by ourselves. And for like 2 hours, which was probably maybe the hardest 2 hours of my life up to that point, it was me glaring at Norm, saying, "What else, Norm? What else?" Because I wanted him to tell me all the stuff that he felt guilty about, right? Because
Mm,
anything he didn't fess up about, he was going to carry into the next week. And that's part of how off schedule just keeps getting worse, right?
absolutely.
So, and I mean, I'm sure this will be hard for people to imagine, but when I'm trying to be mean, I can actually be very mean. so,
What? What?
so it was a pretty intense thing, right? And I kept wondering as we were doing it. I mean, it took like 2 hours, and I was like, am I doing the right thing? Should I keep going? Like, there's no rule book or there's no manual for that kind of stuff, or at least it wasn't in our manager manuals.
No.
And I remember like I kept, what else, Norm? What else, Norm? Like every little thing. And then at some point, he said the last thing, and then he
Oh,
took this really deep breath, and then he leaned back in his chair and sighed. And that was all of it. And so then I sat, I said, Norm, a lot of us have had trouble, right? It's not the end of the world. You're not a bad person. And here's what we're going to do to get you back on track. One, if you ever think you want to quit, you got to promise me you're going to follow me for at least 2 full days before you leave. Two, you're going to call me every single night. And if you had any problems, like you had any schedule stuff, you're going to tell me. You're just going to tell me. Right. And then there was, like I think the third one was you're going to finish the summer no matter what. Right. So it was this big conversation. Norm and I talk every night. He gets back on track. Right. At the end of it's more toward the end of the summer. It was the week that we were getting ready to select student managers, right? And you want to be really thoughtful about who you pick first, because that's going to send a big signal in your organization. And I remember we decided to pick Norm. We wanted him. And I was the one who got to tell him. So I take him
oh,
out that day and I say, Norm, I want you to know this is kind of a big deal. Like it matters who we choose to be on the team with us. And we all talked about it and we really want you. And he starts to cry and he says, Huck, um, nobody ever believed in me before I did this job.
wow.
Norm came from a house where his parents were, his dad was hard on him, and it just wasn't a lot of like positive, you know, um, motivational kind of support, right? He didn't have the experience that he was like really loved and somebody believed in him. And we believed in him that summer, right? Like, and I think that's part of what makes the book feel so great. Like my second summer, I was a wreck. I did all kinds of damage. I helped burn down a whole sales organization, and my boss believed in me, and he helped me come back, and he helped me repair the damage, and go on to have a lot of great summers and do a lot of good work. He kept me around long enough that I could mature and become a decent manager, like I wanted to be. And that there were probably a lot of moments like that, right? But Norm always stuck out in my brain because It's really hard to hear a kid say nobody's ever really believed in me. But the truth is that summer, all of us did believe in him. We did fight for him. We fought with him. We stood behind him. We helped him go on to become a pretty darn good student manager. And then Norm went on to become a kindergarten teacher. Like this
Wow.
amazing, beautiful human being, right? You could just see him in a room full of little tiny humans. Like that's the kindergarten teacher you want teaching your kids to be a human. And I'm it's
Wow.
funny because I try to tell people later, I'm like, unless you're like somebody who really was into unit, like we were all really into units, right? I don't remember my best week. I don't remember how many units I sold my best summer. I can give you rough estimates, right? But I will never forget Norm. And we're also blessed because we've all been a part of 1,000 conversations like that we can't even remember because there's another 15,000 in the wings, right? Like how amazing to have an experience where you get to be the person who helps Norm turn it around and you get to be there the moment that he gets that a whole bunch of people believe in him. Like who gets to
Yeah.
do that?
Yeah, I understand why that would be your most proud moment for sure. I mean, moms didn't love him, daughters didn't, but you guys did, and that love got him through. That's all it
And it
was.
and it was love to be like, "No, you have to
Yeah,
tell me. I know you're off track. I know you're not doing what you're like." That kind of accountability, right? And who trusts a 21-year-old with that, right? That was a
yeah,
life altering conversation for him, not because I got to yell at him because of what he did wrong, but because that was the way that we got him to come back.
yeah.
Who gets to practice that in your internship?
Now you're getting people coffee. That's
Yeah.
really cool. And, I think
Which
that answers
which
the
in
question.
coffee's defense can also be life changing.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. As a Colombian, I understand. But to answer your question from earlier, like what is it about Southwestern? It's that. It's moments like that. It
Yeah.
really is. Because you can go make money going door to door doing the painters thing or doing, selling
Yep.
other companies. And you can learn leadership skills at different conferences and stuff like that. But a place where you're doing all of them at the same time,
Yeah.
nah.
And I do tell people sometimes, like, you will never in your entire life, like, you'd have to work so hard to find a place where all of the people around you are as invested in your success and will work as hard to help you grow into the person you want to be. Like, there are lots of places where you can make a difference, and there are lots of places where you can be with good people, but that's just not most businesses are not set up to make that a value proposition.
Yeah. No. And more importantly too with that, it's like it- the what it did for him and now he's paying that forward. Like it changed your life too because we're here talking about it. You sold in this would have been 1986, your first year as a manager. So we're looking
Yeah.
at what
A
eight,
long
17
time.
years,
You just say a long time.
a few years ago. Um, but like it's just amazing that those are the moments that like really stick with us. Like, I mean, yeah, some people do still remember units, like you said, but yeah, that's so cool. Thank you for sharing that. That's amazing.
It
It's an
was
amazing story.
I was lucky they trusted me with it and that they trained me to be ready for it.
Yeah, and that you get yeah, such a cool honor to be able to be that for someone. Okay, so I got some rapid fire questions from you that I need to ask you now,
Sure.
and then I need the covering objections story with Joe Yurichek,
Yeah,
and
Bobby Joe,
and
you're a check.
and then the dog ponytail. So we're gonna go into rapid fire questions. Here we go. All right. What was your favorite territory that you sold in out of your 5 summers?
Ooh. Um, Probably North Carolina my first summer just because I remember it. So, I spent most of my first summer lost in Davie County, North Carolina. I had to develop an affinity for it or go crazy.
I
And by the
mean,
way, years later, Virgie's teams were selling in North Carolina. So I went back to lead a Sunday meeting and I went out to visit my old territory and I got lost again.
of course. Classic. Happens once, if it happens once, it can happen twice, It is
Yeah.
what
Mhm.
what was your favorite kind of turf? Big break,
Oh,
country, rich
country.
country, okay.
I
What
grew up
kind
in
of
a
country?
trailer in South Dakota.
Yeah,
So if you give me a lot of farms and, driveway, I felt really at home out there in small towns. Yeah.
heck yeah. Everybody loves country. I love that. Favorite advanced sales tape that you listened to, or did you listen to any of
Oh
them?
yeah, for sure. I mean, I listened to God, what did I listen to? I mean, for sure Zig Ziglar, and then or sorry, Mort Utley, and I think probably Bill Zizzy.
Yeah, the Bill Zizzy one is a crowd favorite. It's hard to beat. Favorite HQ?
Oh, for sure, my first summer. I started off in a really crappy HQ, and then somebody's Sandy Doolittle's roommate left, which was the best thing that ever happened to me, or she got moved or something. Sandy lived in this private. It was inside a mansion, so we had our own private entrance. We had a bathroom, a bedroom, a living room, and a kitchen, and Sandy and I would share a bed, and she was closest to the bathroom. And every morning when the alarm would go off, we would fight to the cold shower. So we'd roll into Sunday meetings with weird mystery bruises and but it was this gorgeous. Ed and Myra Bullington hosted us. They hadn't had kids of their own. They were the most loving, amazing people. It was probably the best setup, except that my third summer, my landlord did my laundry. She did all our laundry. So on a Tuesday, you'd come home and have clean clothes.
That's a
Oh, it
good
was
day.
amazing.
Yeah, because I remember this is the little little talked about things that happen in the book field, but are true. Is like, I mean, at least I did. I had a Monday polo, a Tuesday polo, a Wednesday polo, a Thursday, like one for each
Oh yeah.
day, because it's like I'm going to drench this in
Yep.
sweat and
Hmm.
disgustingness. And so you had like your outfits picked out for the, or
Yeah.
I mean, maybe not picked out for the week, but there was always like a, like by the end of Saturday, you're like, this is bad, and so you needed to
Yeah.
do laundry, otherwise it was Monday was, because sometimes you'd miss laundry on Sundays, and you'd
Yep.
have to go to back to Monday with no,
Crusty.
it's it was bad. It was so
Bad.
bad.
Imagine it was worse for dudes, right? It's just
It just smells so rough. It's
yeah.
rough shape, okay?
Yeah.
Favorite, if you have one of these,
Yeah.
favorite off schedule story?
Oh God, no. I was off schedule my second summer and just so miserable. It was
Nice.
just the worst.
You didn't go to
All
the
of that
movies or
was
something?
Oh my God, no. It was all misery and shame, like just not hitting the demos that I was supposed to hit and being so horrified and embarrassed and driving around a little too much. Like it was off schedule was awful for me. I only did it one summer and then I was like, yeah, I'll never do that again ever no way.
You didn't have a fun off schedule time, man. I went to the movies. It was a good time. Alright.
Oh, dude.
It was great.
Don't listen, kids.
I
The
had the
guilt
full
and shame. The
I had the
guilt,
full
the
all-inclusive
shame.
experience is what I say. I had the on schedule and off schedule experience. Alright. Best, or not best, most memorable sales day. It doesn't mean everybody bought or that it was the most units you sold, but, like,
Oh,
a sales day that you're like, "Ooh." Well,
yeah.
and if this is the ponytail story, we can
It's the ponytail story.
okay, so we'll get to that. Okay, so we'll get to
Yep.
that. Favorite breakfast spot?
Oh my God. We went to the Biscuit King my first summer, and they had these cinnamon rolls that were this big. And then they had a spatula they would dip into a bucket of frosting and just slurp it on top of.
The Biscuit King
Oh God, it was the best thing in the universe. I still think about it.
in Lexington?
Uh No, we were in North
What,
Carolina. Yeah, so probably Lexington. I think that's where my
High
HQ was.
Point? Do you remember? Usually when people mention it, I try to, like, do a man on the street and share screen and put them right in front of it, but I can't.
Oh
There's,
my
like
God.
there's, like, 3 of them, so I don't know which one you would have liked, but Biscuit King,
Lexington, we lived in Lexington. It was so good. A spatula, like just a giant
spatula.
spatula of frosting. It's magical.
And back then, you were running and burning so many calories that it was like, "Get it, give it all to me."
Oh
Just
no, I was a
oh,
chubster. By the time I came back at the end of the summer, I'm the only person in the history of selling books that gained weight. But at that point, I was eating like two giant peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. I put them on because that was like I was sad and downtrodden. Probably hadn't slept in 3 months, right? And so I would put them on the hood of my or on the dash of my car, and they'd get a little toasty, and then I'd flip them over. Oh man, PBJ that's like an inch thick. They were
Good
magical.
stuff. All right, fair
Yep.
enough. All right, and then the last rapid fire question, which is also could lead to, your other story, is your best follow day, whether you follow someone or they follow you, but I'm guessing this covering objection
Oh my
story.
god.
Your fa
That's the covering objection story. Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
So,
So it'll be this
uh,
story and then the ponytail of you know what.
yeah, and
Okay,
we'll end
so
on the doc story.
yeah,
So, and if you're still listening, God bless you, man. Just keep. It's because Andre's good at asking good questions, right?
there was a good
Um,
interruption there. Oh, I guess they don't know about that. Never mind.
yeah. So, like you need to do Alecia Huck part one, part two. It'll be like The Godfather, right?
You just keep going back. Yes.
Dude.
I need what we need is you and Rebecca Gebhardt on here or like somebody like some
Yeah.
other really badass book chick, maybe you and Virgie. Ooh, be
Oh, that would
fun.
be interesting.
Yeah.
Um, so my fourth summer, they send me fourth or fifth summer, they send me down to follow Bobby Joe Yurichek, who was this amazing book chick, totally killed it every single year. And I don't remember a lot about following her, but I did fly in on a Saturday afternoon so I could be at their Sunday meeting, right? And then I worked with her on Monday and then came home. But at that Sunday meeting, some genius, they were getting ready to do a student manager meeting. They were like, Alicia, go interview the first years and see what they want to learn. Pretty simple, no big deal task, right? So I go out and I'm interviewing them and I'm like, okay, what do you guys want to learn? What are you working on? They're like, oh, how do you do this? How do you do this? How do you blah, 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 blah. And they kept going on and on and on. And, how do you answer objections? And finally I just started answering the questions, right? Because like I was bored. We all know what they're asking, blah, blah, blah. So they're like, how do you answer objections? And finally I go, you guys, do you really want to know? And they're like, yeah, we really want to know because we taught them to be coachable, right? I go,
Mm.
well, listen, I was a top first year dealer on a top team, and I answer all objections the exact same way. They're like, oh my God, what do you say? I go, the ones in the sales manual aren't bad, right? They talk if the husband comes in, blah, blah, blah. I go, but honestly, whatever they say, I just answer it the same way. Like, oh, I got to talk to my husband and my kids won't use them. I just do this. I go, Mrs. Jones, you're so stupid. And then I say exactly what's in the manual for that objection, right?
That's a
And they're
great
like,
that's great.
there you go. There you go. No, no way. Does that really work? Do you really do that? I go, yeah. I go, here's the thing. You gotta slap your forehead. And I
Beautiful.
just draw it really out, right? Like, Mrs. Jones, you're so stupid. And whatever's in the book, right? So we roll into the meeting. No big deal, whatever. I follow Bobby Joe Yurichek. I go back to my headquarters. I sell a lot more books, whatever. That year at our awards banquet, I hadn't seen Jeff Zymet, who was running that org in a while.
Oh boy.
And he charges up to me the first day and goes, I'm going to kill you. I go, what? What did I do? And he goes, you fucking taught them you're so stupid. He goes, it took weeks for us to figure out they were doing it and get them to stop.
Crash and burn an org in one PC. Those kids
Oh my
took
God. So
notes.
if you're somebody who is out there in the world doing the you're so stupid because bless your poor little heart, you were teachable, I am so sorry.
There's someone out there who's in sales who did not get nipped in the butt, and they're
We
still like,
we had a guy in our org who used to joke about after his how he would solidify the close with old people is when he was leaving their house, he'd say, don't you go dying on me now.
"That's so good."
And he was like quirky enough that I thought maybe he really did that, but I just can only imagine.
And some of them did die,
But the
statistically
ones,
speaking.
can you imagine some sweet little rookie, Mrs. Jones? You're so stupid. And then, like, what was happening when they said that?
Dude, especially if it's like an objection that's like a legit like, "Oh, I don't know if we can afford it," or something,
And
or
then,
like
and then they had to like recover from that. Probably got
yeah.
thrown out of houses, or maybe like the person didn't even know, and they were like, they learned you can say anything as a salesperson if you just say it confidently enough.
Yeah, I was gonna say, what if like it worked?
What if like they gave my husband, "You're so stupid," and then you answer the objection, and then they
Mhm.
buy, and then the kid leaves the house
I don't know.
going, "Oh my god, Alecia Huck is a genius," and they just keep doing it.
Based on how mad
Brutal.
Jeff was, I don't think that's how it went.
Fair enough. That's true.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's,
It's
but I
it's
love that.
great it's great
I
to
love
teach
that.
people to be, coachable. That, I think, is why we get accused of being a cult.
That's true. Now we have an inside joke, right? So you're gonna say something, or I'm gonna say something, and be like, "Andres, you're so stupid,"
Stupid.
or whatever. You gotta say it like that, though. You can't be like, "Andres,
Yeah,
you're so
but yeah,
stupid," because then it's
I
like,
was very
"Oh."
serious when I taught them this. I was like, "You gotta drag it out, and it's the smacking yourself on the forehead that will make it not offensive."
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Must be.
Oh god.
The first half of this episode, take the advice. The second half of this episode, grain of salt. Grain of
That's
salt.
right.
Alright, and then
Always
alright,
think for
so
yourself.
here we are at the ponytail. Oh my gosh.
Okay.
Okay. I have the
So,
gist of a memory of this story. So, it's kinda like when you watch The Matrix the second time, you're
yeah.
like,
Yeah, you're like,
I think I remember
"Ooh."
I know he dodges bullets at some point, but it's worth
Oh,
the whole story again.
I
Yeah.
like all these analogies. I like being compared to the Matrix better than, like, say Hitler. That seems like a better fit for me.
I
Just
wasn't comparing you to Hitler. I'm just saying
anyway,
that's what
moving
their
on. I
genius
shouldn't have
was.
brought it back up. I shouldn't have brought it back up. Okay. So when I used to go down to Texas and do spring production meeting with Virgie's kids, right? I would work. I'd PC all the managers, and then I do basically like Lee McCroskey's like doc story, right? Like he did the dirt pile, and I do the doc because that's what happened my first summer. So this is by popular request. So we'll
Yeah.
record it here for posterity, and people can have it. Okay. So my first summer, I'm down in North Carolina. My territory had been worked the year before by a guy from the education division who sold 7,000 units in half of it.
Nice.
It was a whole thing, right? And, I remember being in sales school the day that I can't remember if it was Lee or Dan that used to talk about the excuse that you make where you're like, yeah, I want to get an A. And then you go through the semester and you don't do the work. And you're like, well, I could have gotten an A if I wanted to.
Right.
And whichever one of them did that part, I remember sitting there feeling like giant spotlight was on me. And I think it was the Wednesday of sales school. And that night, I'm sitting outside our terrifyingly gross motel with all the bugs next to a soda machine because it was the only like privacy I could find. Right? There's all these bugs, and my sales manager had us write a letter to ourselves. And I just remember realizing at that time that I had never given all of what I had to anything. Like, and I was always a top performer, but I was usually like sort of at the bottom of the top category, right? Like I'm in the mix, but I don't have to be the best of the best. And so I don't know, that night, it just really hit me that I'd never given all my effort to anything, and I didn't really know what I could count on myself for. And I grew up in a trailer in South Dakota, and there's nothing wrong with that. My parents were very hard workers, and we never went hungry, and all those things. Um, but I also remember watching my mother cry while she balanced the checkbook and
Mm.
want to do things for us that she couldn't because we just didn't have the money. And so that night, I'm sitting there next to the stupid soda machine with all the bugs and the cobwebs and the heat and sweat and tears all over because you just cry randomly around the book field. And I just decided that I was going to be the hardest worker in my org because I couldn't guarantee that I was going to hit the goal that I'd set because I had never sold books before and I didn't know how everybody else was going to do, but I could control that. And I decided that if I worked as hard as I could, if I was the hardest worker in our org that summer, that at the end of the summer I'd feel good about the results no matter what they were. And I would know something about myself that I didn't know going into that summer.
Mm.
So we that year, at the end of the summer, we had a number one team and we had two orgs that met together that summer. And we peppered the entire Superstar book. So you want to know that being a rookie in that organization, we had top producers all over the place. Like sometimes you're the top producer and you sold 300 units. No, 300 units wouldn't even get you on the board in my org because we had at the end of the year, we had the number one, number two, number four, number eight, like all of those were in an org that we saw every single week.
Wild.
Right. So
Wow.
So my first summer, when I started out, I didn't start out selling a ton of books, but I was working really hard. And I was really proud of that. And every week I would get better. So even though on Sundays, everybody else, mainly Virgie Sanford, my nemesis and, beloved friend, um, like Virgie's kicking my butt every week. Tanya Thomas is kicking my butt. Mike Lippert's kicking my butt, right? All these people are wiping up the floor with me, but at least I'm working as hard as I said I would, and I'm getting better, right? And then comes my 5th week on the book field. And I don't know what it was about that week. I don't know why it happened. But basically, Friday night, I realized that no matter what happened on Saturday, I wasn't going to have my best week. Like I was going to go down. So the thing that I'd been proud of this whole time was now gone. And I knew that I was going to have to go into Sunday meeting and watch other people get all the recognition. And maybe I'd get recognition for doing a lot of demos and working a lot of hours, but I was still sucking and getting beat pretty bad. So Saturday morning rolls around and I'm not feeling good at all, but I decide that I'm going to just get through the day, right? If I just get through this day, then tomorrow I just got to get through the Sunday meeting and Monday I can start fresh, right? So I go out and man, it's just one of those fucking days. Like people are being weird. They're being rude. I can't get sit downs. People who should buy aren't buying. I'm so confused. I don't understand. It's frustrating. It's annoying. But I keep plugging away, right? And then, in the afternoon, something weird happened. Like this mom bought, but then she yelled at me as I left her house. She's like, "My kids better use these books." And I was like, I'm a wreck. I'm emotional, and I'm like, I don't understand why she's yelling at me. If you don't want to buy the book, it's this whole thing, right? And I remember Lee McCroskey's dirt pile story, and I remember him saying, "Hey, if you're ever just about to crack, find a dirt pile, set your watch for 10 minutes, go cry, and then go back to work." And I was out in the country, so there weren't, there were probably plenty of dirt piles, but I think I cheated a little bit and drove a little ways to where I knew this dock had been. I had driven down this long gravel road and found that there was a dock on the river there. So I drive down and I'm, a pile of tears, right? Like I'm pulling napkins out of my glove compartment because there's snot everywhere. It's bad. And I drive out to this dock and I get out of my truck and I go down to the dock and I sit down and I just let it all out. And then I realized that I forgot the Kleenex and I got to go back to my truck and get more napkins because there is a lot of snot and tears and stuff. I go back and I sit down and I'm so fucking sad. Like I miss my mom, I miss my family, I miss South Dakota, I miss my friends, and I'm so fucking tired. Like I'm just exhausted. It's been emotionally this grueling grind fest. And the thing, that was another F, by the way. And the thing
Oh, yeah.
that's holding,
Sorry, keeping us honest here.
please try. But I just want to go home, right? Like it's not working. I'm not winning. I'm doing okay, I guess, because I'm working really hard, but I'm not victorious. I'm not becoming a better person. I'm a sad, miserable person who hates everything about this. And now I'm supposed to put a smile on my face and go to the next door? Like why the holy fuck do I want to do that? That's the worst idea ever. Right? And so I'm sitting there and I'm crying and I keep looking at my watch and I've got, 8 minutes and 7 minutes and 4 minutes. And then some guy puts his boat in the water down at the end up the river and he can see me and he's looking at me like, are you he's giving me the look, which I'm sure we've all gotten. So then I pick up my feet and I sort of waddle my way over and I put my feet on the other side of the dock. So I'm facing the other way. Right. And I keep crying. And I keep looking at my watch and there's no answers. There's nothing to do except get up and go to the next house. And you get that horrible aching pain in your chest where you feel like you can't even move. But now it's been 10 minutes and I promised myself I was going to work really hard. And I'm stuck in North Carolina. So I did what Lee told us to do. I did what my student manager told me to do. I got up, I wiped everything off, and I got in my truck and I went to the next house. And it sucked. It didn't get better. People were still being stupid and weird, and it was frustrating and hard. And fucking hot as hell because North Carolina
It's hot.
is hot as hell, right? They have a thing there called the heat index, which is like wind chill, except it wants to kill you in a different direction.
Yes.
And
Yes.
so, I make it through and somebody buys like some kids books, right? And then I'm mad because they bought kids books and not the big blue books back when we had big blue books, right? And it's funny because if you've never sold books, you don't understand how sometimes making a sale can make you madder than not making a
Yeah.
sale because they buy
Yeah.
the wrong thing. So then it's finally the end of the night. It went how it went. And I get to this place. I'm like, okay, it's like 9:45. And I'm like, okay, finally I can go home. I got my 30 demos. I'm done. Right. And I'm just crying and I'm a mess again. I've been crying off and on all day. And I get to this point, this T in the road. And if I turn to the right, I go back to my headquarters. Sandy's there and food is there. And tomorrow's a Sunday meeting. And I'm done and I don't have to talk to anybody else or pretend that I'm a happy, healthy, terrific book person. But it's only 9:45. And if I go left, there's 2 houses I haven't caught yet down that road about 3 miles. And I sat there for a while because there is nothing inside me that wanted to go left. And I felt like I'd already done everything I could do. But I promised myself that I would be the hardest worker. And I promised myself that I would give it everything I had, not part of everything. And so, swearing like a sailor, I turn and I go left. And I drive down to where those 2 houses are, and it's really late. And one of them has lights on. And I make myself get out of the car and I make myself knock. And the stupid jerks bought the blue books, but they only bought 2. And the other family wasn't home. But by the time I got done with the demo, the other family had come home. So I make myself go over there and they buy some kids' books. And I don't even care. I'm not even happy. I'm just so damn glad to be done. And I get in my truck. And I remember Heath Larson that year was like, you guys, you're going to have this day where like you set a big goal and it's going to be Saturday night. You're going to hit your goal and you'll unroll the windows and turn up the radio and the wind and it'll be amazing. And this was not that day. This was like roll down the windows, cry, right? And as I drive, I'm flipping through my order book trying to add up my orders because I've got to get on my stat call and tell them what I sold. And I'm just so glad to be done. I'm like, all I got to do is make it through tomorrow. Monday's a fresh start, right? And I flip through and I add them up and that doesn't look right. And I do it again and I do it again and I do it again. And then I realize it was my best day on the book field so far. I sold more books in that one day than I sold my whole first week. And I hated every minute of it. And it was so hard. And it is a very weird thing that your best day on the book field might actually be your worst day, but that's what makes the book field so great because it's not about what's happening out there, it's you. And one of the things I always tell people, I'm like, it's not the book field, it's you. The problems you deal with on the book field, you've been dealing with everywhere in your life, your whole life. And you will either get better at them or they will get better at you. So when you go on the book field, it's like lemonade or orange juice concentrate, right? If you've ever had that,
Yeah.
it's life, except it's a lot more concentrated and it takes more to deal with it. It's never the book field. It's not your spouse. It's not your job. Like there are problems you got to manage out there in the world, but most of it is you. And the problem and the solution that day was me. And it was not the first hard day that I had on the book field. It definitely wasn't the last one. But there is something about being the kind of person who can go take the 10 minutes on your dirt pile or your dock and then get back up, even though it doesn't look like you're going to produce anything useful, even though you don't want to, even though you're heartbroken and sad and exhausted and lonely and terrified and all these other things. And being that person has made a huge difference in my life and knowing that I am that person. And then at our awards banquet in the fall, and my parents came to that. And I remember Jeff Hahn talked about each one of us that was on that team. And at the very end, he had me up there, and he just turned around and he looked at me for like the longest time. And then he looked back out at all these amazing people and their parents, and he said, Alecia Huck is the hardest worker I've ever known.
Wow.
And I lost it, and Jeff lost it. And by the way, there was a girl that came along the very next summer, and she's 10 times as hard of a worker as I am. So the crown has moved on. But I knew what I could count on myself for. And after that summer, I knew that I wasn't going to get stuck in a situation where I couldn't feed my kids, where I couldn't put clothes on their back, where I couldn't provide for my family or myself. Like I knew I would always be okay because I knew what I could count on myself for. And I feel like knowing that at 19 years old was this huge gift. And then after that, I learned how to be a manager, and I learned all the things I did with people that didn't work. I learned all that the hard way, right? And there were other doc moments that happened back on campus. But for me, that's the day on the book field that sticks out the most. And I don't remember what the number of units was. I vaguely remember the time I hit, I think it was chairman's at the time. I don't even remember. But I remember that one because it was me proving that I could be the person I wanted to become.
That's wild. Look at you. That's a yeah, okay.
Best day, worst day, right?
So crazy. Well, and also what it means, it's so much stuff in there too. Like when you think about like inside, you were so hell bent on focusing on what was going wrong and what sucked about the day, when if you just like looked up, you were actually having the best day statistically, but it took all day, right? So that's so fascinating, because to you, you're like, well, I got 3 customers, but
Yeah.
like, you know, it was the kind of day that you would have killed for the first week of your summer, you know?
And the last week, to be fair.
Yeah, same. But yeah, that's amazing. That's amazing.
Boom, baby.
That's impactful.
Boom, baby.
And the fact that you got your parents watched, you get, someone talk about you like that and what it meant, what it represented, and how it changed your life forever. I mean, we're still talking about it 4 years later,
I mean, my relationship with my parents is not perfect, but they are 2 incredibly hardworking people. And my mom, especially, like, I feel like that's one of the things, like you just do the work that's there to be done. Right. And it meant a lot that she heard him say that.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Whew.
Game on, baby. See, I thought no way this one would be as long as the last one.
You leave it to me.
So much fun. We have so much fun.
Yeah, this is great.
Thank you. You're such a generous listener. I appreciate it. It's fun to
it's encouraging.
relive some of this.
And I learned so much. I feel like I've learned so much. I love learning, so it helps me a ton too. Thank you for being on. Welcome back anytime. Go check out Alicia's other episode that we had with the Executive Exercise podcast. Is a little bit more business oriented. If you want to check that out as well. If you want to get a hold of Alecia, if you are, because we do have people who are like, whether you're the CEO of a fast growing company or in the C level of a fast growing company.
You have a conference, you need somebody to come speak.
Yeah. If you need to check out, she's on LinkedIn. You can go to we're going to put all the links, Maverick Company, and for your website and stuff. We'll just put them all on the description. We'll just scroll up.
If you connect on LinkedIn, like tell me why, because I get a lot of spam and crap. So be like, I'm a book man. I heard your blah 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 or something. You know what I mean? Like, let me know who you are so I don't ignore you.
Yeah, and if maybe you sold around the same time and you're like just want to say hi. If you can't find Alecia, just get a hold of us, message us on Instagram or something, and we'll pass the message along. So on that note, thank you so much, my friend, for being on. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. We'll catch you guys on the next episode. My name is Andres Gamboa, and this has been the Ponytails Podcast. Bye-bye, everybody.